Going to try this one more time, and it doesn't appear to be doing anything. That's great.
No,
I don't. I don't
don't say
understand.
that. Hold on, I'm gonna check. Oh, I hear it. I hear audio. At least on Facebook. See, I'm, I'm on obviously a delay, but I hear
Hey,
it.
is my voice on there as well?
We'll hear it in a second. Hold on. Yes,
All right.
this
Um,
works.
we here. Let me do one more test so I don't.
Check YouTube, obviously, but
Yes. Is my voice still coming through?
so far, hold on, try it again. I just had to switch back. I was going to share the new link.
Yeah. Do you? I think I hear me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Nice. All right.
We're good. We're
Um,
back, folks. And we got confirmation from Doug as well. We're good.
yes, from the Almighty Doug. All right. So we are back. I do sincerely apologize to all of you guys and to Elliot for wasting about 45 minutes.
That's okay.
Uh,
Late
but
myself.
we are back. We are here. So I guess we'll sort of recap the conversation that we had that was frankly riveting. That none of you could hear. We don't have Greg with us today. He had some other stuff going on tonight, so he's unfortunately we're going to be without the one, the only, the Gregson. But it's just me and Elliot, and like we decided before, I like to refer to Elliot as now our he's our part-time host. He's the host with the most, and when he can join us, it's makes things all the better.
Well, right. Like what I said when we reviewed it, I was like, well, I'm not normally I'm a guest, but I'm a guest co-host tonight, due to the circumstances.
Right. Um, lame. Gregson being lame. Steve. Yeah. It happens, brother.
It does happen, but hey, also so do lengthy audio issues, which are
Yeah.
now resolved. So
Yes.
we're back.
In,
We're in.
in case anyone was wondering, we are deciding to blame Greg for the audio issues.
It is
He's not.
almost 100% his fault.
Yes. Let's see here. There we go. And I now have everything back up and running.
Same. And now I can. Yeah, everything's good. See, it was just a minor, really long speed bump.
Yes.
No big deal.
It was just what is it? Absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Yes, I hope people were chomping at the bit for us to come back. They're just like, oh man, I know this stream is happening. We just need to get it
Yes.
over there. And honestly, the thing that sucked for me is like it's just all on your end, so I'm just kind of like hanging out here, petting my cat, which you can't see, but she is here.
Yeah, but hey,
Yeah.
the cat had the magic sauce.
Yep.
The pause on frantically going on keyboard. So now that we got everyone, we got audio. The show is actually, what's the word I'm looking for here? Working.
Yes.
Elliot, you
Functional
just
show.
launched a new video today where
did.
you're driving around in a 1972 Corvette.
Yes. Good memory.
Yeah.
And what I would call, which I didn't have the balls to say it, I said it in the thumbnail, but not the title. The last good C3. 73s were okay. But before we get too deep into it, but yeah, I think that's the last of the all steel bumper Corvettes of when they looked like they were supposed to look like before cascading safety laws kind of started to ruin the look of them, and then also Malay's era set in and choked the power. So, 72 was like the last good year
That actually was.
before cascade. So, 72 was like the last good year.
That actually was a question I was going to ask. When I know it was like right around 71, 72 when they were like, "All right, muscle cars, you're done."
Yeah, and that's across the board. I mean, whether it was Dodge, Ford, every single like you could even say like even Mustangs, they pretty much were done after that. It was like, and then they got, especially you guys a Mustang guy, then they got huge and grotesque and very like they still had a huge motor. It made 110 horsepower or something insane. It was across the board. Everything sucked because it was like simultaneous. At least in the Corvettes case, they had to switch, and they call them rubber bumper vets after that because they had to take away the steel front bumper, but they had a steel rear bumper in '73, and then in '74 they were like both rubber bumper both sides. It was like for safety, whatever, low speed impact stuff. You even see it on the Porsches where they have like a huge bumper for the US spec cars, and they even have like a spring that's like an accordion spring on them for like these 5 mile per hour impacts that's supposed to just go and back out. I was like, I don't know why that everybody just got really fascinated with bumping into each other at 5 miles an hour during that time period, but well, it ruined the design of a lot of good cars around here. Anyway, no, like you said, I did have this video. It wasn't just about that. I just was highlighting that it was the last good C3. I do a lot in the video because it's something I filmed when I was out in Indiana doing worldwide auctioneers stuff, and this was actually day 2 or 3 of what they call the enthusiast tour. So the video is a lot about the car and kind of my thoughts because if you guys have even watched this stream at all, I'm a Corvette guy. And I have a yellow Corvette, so it was very fitting that I got to have another yellow Corvette for the day, and a lot of miles. What struck me as fascinating, and like I said, do watch the video; it's pretty interesting. And the best part about this video is I didn't have to shoot it or edit it myself. I had a camera guy with like real camera equipment, and, like drone shots and stuff. It's freaking awesome.
Yeah, I noticed the production quality.
Way better than than not this me shooting and be like trying to put something together. And then also it's a lot easier to walk and talk if there's just somebody holding a camera for you. It's mind-boggling how that works.
Yeah.
But it is it's fun. I take the car out, talk a lot about it, but then we do some adventures. I mean, and almost none of them are car related in this video. But it is still fascinating. I mean, I really did think it's the first stop we make in the video. We had car stuff going on, and there is car stuff in the video, but they stopped us at a jeweler. And I remember even reading that on the itinerary. I was like, what does this have to do with anything? I mean, we're used to like kind of touring these collections, and everything's pretty car centric. And all of a sudden, there's like, you ever go to a jewelry store? I'm like, what is this? And turned out to be like one of my favorite stops on the whole trip. It was this massive place in the middle of seemingly nowhere. I mean, it's like on the outskirts of Fort Wayne, and it's this huge company that makes their own jewelry and sells some high-end stuff. And they had us in, and they have like, it's a 2-story building, which is crazy for a jeweler in Indiana. And they let us like handle diamonds. I mean, they handed us a tray. I have pictures of it. They just were like, here's a tray of loose diamonds. So you can kind of see what we're dealing with here. And I mean, they were just kind of all over the place. I mean, it was the kind that you're like, oh no, some got stuck under my fingernail, like kind of a thing. And they were like, yeah, no, go ahead and like rub them around. You like just rubbed them like pebbles, and they're like, pass these around. This is a tray of, I don't know how many dollars worth of diamonds. And then they're like, here's a tray of sapphires. So why don't you guys feel these? And we're like, okay, neat. And then at one point they just gave us this huge like cut single rock. And it came around and I was like, this is wild. I mean, like, I know I'm not a jewelry guy, but I know expensive when I see it. I just had to ask him. I was like, okay, well, how much is like this one diamond worth? And the guy was like giving us a tour. Like, oh, that one's probably about $110,000. And I'm like, neat. And it was like, just pass it around. But it's a fun video. And I show that kind of stuff in there. But a lot of it obviously is centered around the C3 Corvette. And, even chat, even as not a Corvette guy, you're not a Corvette guy, but you're a Ford guy. It's such an iconic body style. It is such a good looking car.
Yes. Cause I think it was still like, that still had some of the 60s charm in its design before things started getting like the Mustang of the similar era got very 70s in my opinion.
Right. Yes.
Where the Corvette never really did. I mean, I don't know if it was just the fact that it was, the fact that it was like Corvette, and Corvette always stands for kind of, the American sports car, that sort of thing. But I mean, there hasn't been a bad looking Corvette.
No, and the good news is, unlike the Mustang, they never got big. Like they never went through that era. They always stayed about the same size. Like they're
Right.
not small cars, but they like you even have to admit like a 73, 74 Mustang, it is I mean, it's a Yukon XL of a car. I mean, it is a huge big car and it is a far cry away from what they started out with in 64. I mean, that's a little car. And all of a sudden they were like, yeah, believe it or not, in 10 years, this thing's going to be triple the size and half the horsepower. And you're like, good, nice. What a transformation. Now, obviously, Corvettes went way down in horsepower, but they, with the C3, I think that was like the longest body style because if you take it, it's like 68 to 82. It's a long time to be in the same body style and the same general like design. It just got worse and worse as time went on. One thing in the video that I did, which was interesting, I've had some experiences with C3s in my life. This car was not like this was the 60s. So all the cars were the same. It was just what size engine it got. Like it's not like today where with the engine comes a different differential and bigger brakes and all this other stuff. Back then it was like all kind of the same. How big was the motor? And this was the base model car, which is a just a regular Chevy 350, not making a lot of horsepower. I mean, like a dismal amount, like 210 or something like that. But somehow 360 pound-feet of torque. So the thing is like a freaking diesel.
Yeah, well, that's engines of that era, right?
Yeah,
Like the big blocks were like, here's your 200 horsepower and a
yeah.
metric ass ton of torque. I
It's
mean,
just it's wild. And the thing is like, but the good news about that also that era is the styling. I mean, if a layman is just looking at that car, it's still a really cool looking Stingray. And we had a 72 big block on that day of the tour too. So same, same year. It's like having a base model and a ZR1. And like the only thing was like obviously the big block car had a little cooler stance and had a cooler hood, and it was obviously way faster. But to most people, they'd be like, "There's two Corvettes. These are great looking cars," except for the big block cars worth six figures, and the one I was driving could be had by a normal dude. It's amazing the price discrepancy even today. And I think it represents, especially not really having driven a base C3, I think it represents an actual really good value in classic car ownership. If you were looking to get into a really good timeless classic car, you can get yourself into a small block 350 Corvette for not a lot of money. And I mean, as far as curb appeal goes, it's got every bit of as much of it as a big block car. And heck, if you really like the hood that much, they're pretty easy to swap. So, I mean, I think, after spending a lot of time with it, it was, I loved it. And, I've driven the big boy cars of that era. So it was pretty nice. And I say it in the video, but the thing that strikes me that is wild is that it's really only 20 years older than my Corvette. And it seems like a lifetime. It's like, no, this one's ancient technology and I have a modern car. And it's like, no, only 20. And it just goes to show you how far the industry came during that time. And it was like, oh, I'm driving a yellow Corvette that's exactly 20 years older than mine. And you're like, man, everything changed. Like,
I
yeah,
mean,
all of a
just
sudden it's,
look
yeah.
at 20 years after yours too.
It's,
Right?
oh, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's just car technology advanced so fast, especially once it was the mid 90s when everybody figured out how to pass emissions and make horsepower. They were like, whoa. And, things took off from there. And it's just astonishing, like I said, how far things came from it just being like this body on frame old school thing to being like, oh, it's kind of a monocoque chassis thing, and it's a modern car, drives, it has air conditioning, there's just all these creature comforts, and like I've talked about before here, it's amazing how much it's amazing how long it took people to figure out if you actually put wider wheels on something, it makes it drive better.
Something
That
I could
took
speak to.
Yes, as you know it very well, but I'm saying it's amazing how long it took people to do that. Like even race cars of the 30s and stuff like that, they're like, well, yeah, we just keep making more horsepower, and the tires are this wide, and you're like, why are these things sliding all over the place? Because there's you got to put wider tires or put them on all four corners of the car, not have 3 feet overhanging on each side. But anyway,
Yeah. No, I mean,
that's
and not for nothing. I mean, let's face it, right? Like from a collector's standpoint, from whether it be 1972 to 92 to '02 to 12, whatever. Like the 350, the small block cars aren't. Let's just say you could mess with them a little bit, and you're not really ruining something like a big block, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah. You could do kind of, you could mess with it, like you said. You could tinker with that, and no one's gonna get like, yeah, no one's gonna be like, you've ruined it. There's only things. I mean, there's certain Corvettes that I'm like, please don't mess with, and that's 53 to 55. Please leave those alone. And like 63 coupes, don't resto mod those.
yes.
There's only a few. Just let them
and don't
be.
mess with the fuel cars.
Right. It's just like, there's a few that you're like, don't, and there's so many more that you can mess with, but it's just like, just a few of those don't mess with. But this one, do whatever you want to it. Like it's cool. And like I said, it just represents a good value in car. I mean, it drives well. It still has T-tops. I mean, it's like, that was the first of any manufacturer that did that, where they were like, you can have a coupe and take the tops off. It was like, it's kind of a new thing. And really people didn't get back around to that until the late 70s and 80s before they were like, oh shit, we can put these on everything. I mean, even Mustangs, they had a Fox body T-top car.
Huh.
I mean, it was, that was the time. Like I said, it was a cool concept that was kind of introduced with that car. And yeah, I don't know. It was a good to drive car. And I was thankful I went home. The biggest gamble, which unfortunately isn't in the video, was if the headlights work. And that's just a question on any car.
Any pop-up headlight car is
right. And this is a vacuum-driven pop-up headlight system, so it's like, please. And I didn't really plan on having it out at night, and it was like, and then they popped right up, and I was like, good, okay, we're in business here. But yeah, no, it was good. If you guys should go watch the video if you haven't. Like I said, it's an abnormally well-produced video of mine.
Absolutely, guys. Let me just see if this command actually works. No, we're not. I don't want to tag Elliott.
You can. I mean, I want to see this. I want to see a command. If you can command people to watch this, this is going to be the best
thing. Well, no, I was messing around, and like, how in like live streaming you can put like commands where it's exclamation point something.
Oh yeah.
And this one was supposed to be, if they just typed exclamation point Elliott, it would pop up with your video, but it didn't, so it won't.
No, it just I'm looking at the chat right now, it just looks like you said exclamation point Elliott.
Like almost like reverse Spanish, like Elliott.
And Vic, to answer your question, was it a better performing video? No, because it wasn't the Volvo. And I think everybody here will love that. I can do something like super rare, like somebody gave me a C3 for an entire day, and I was like, boo, what about your broken Volvo?
Yeah, right. Like, that's one of the, once the Volvo community has like their hooks into you, that's it. It's,
I've literally threatened it. I was like, I could drive, a LaFerrari tomorrow in a video, which I would be like, this is the coolest thing ever. And people like, and I mean, I don't even mean it like this. I'm pretty sure I've seen comments like this. I think it was a Lamborghini video I did, and somebody was like, that's gay, go back to the Volvo. And I'm like, this is so cool, what are you talking about? And but I've also said, I was like, somebody asked me, like, what about a video? I was like, if I made a video where I didn't talk and just ate a sandwich in front of my Volvo, it would do better than this highly produced video where I get to drive a pristine C3.
Or like, let's just say you're doing a video on like, what was it, like the one, the Grenadier, right? Like, say you're doing a video with the Grenadier, but like half of the Grenadier is in shot and all of the Volvo's in shot.
Yeah. Oh, they'd be like, this is the best. I've never seen a Grenadier reviewed this well. Like,
this is the best produced one. That's a great. Is that a P2 Grenadier?
Yeah. Oh. I do think that, though. I wish Greg was here to say that. Like, I saw just a regular V70 on the road the other day, like old Nano, but it was a P2, and I was like, oh my god, look, this guy's put in the he's put the money to keep it going. Like, I was just like impressed.
There's one around where I live, that drives around, and it's like, if you were to picture a P2 with stickers and like, what
I can picture it.
It has the roof rack. It has the the climbed Mount Washington sticker on it. It has like all this other stuff. It has the prancing moose on it. I'm still bummed the Hellwinkle didn't take off like that, but
yeah,
it's weird, man. And like, I still have people tagging me on social media, in like some of like not it's died down quite a bit since like it's kind of spread around, but like for probably 18 months after I sold my C30, people were like, ask Chad, ask
Yeah,
this.
yeah. You're like,
And my response was to just, yes, no, at Rich Forsyth, because Rich Forsyth is like, he's a name even like you should know.
he might be the. I've heard his name, so he might. Is he the guy that helps with the Vita stuff a lot too?
He helps. He's one of, I forget the
The,
exact qualification. He's out of Volvo Cars West Houston, in Texas. But like he's like when it comes to like certification, it's like him and like two other dudes in this country. Like he could legitimately have you underneath the hood of your car and be like, all right, see the strut tower, go 6 inches left. All right, go down 4 inches, make a hard right turn. Now feel up. You feel that little hex bolt? All right, there's one right next to it. That's the thing you need to move. Like
that's
it's
yeah.
not, there was so, and he's such an awesome dude. There were so many late nights where I'm working on the C30 and it's just like texting him and I'm like, okay, he just used the word I don't understand. Call like would immediately like he's one of the best. Like the Volvo community in general is awesome.
I know. I did learn that. Like, I did a whole VinWiki story about how the Volvo community was like blew my mind because I was like I said, I took a total chance on this car, and then all of a sudden it was like the most loyal, excited fan base. And like I said, I'd make a video legitimately not knowing something, and my own comments section would literally point me in the direction of something. I was like, huh, how about that? And then we'd look into it, and yep, they were right. And it was like I couldn't find that anywhere on a forum, but I made a video about it. People were like, oh, it's you need to look over, and I'm like, oh my gosh, okay,
And like
well,
and like even like well, I never really got into quote forums. I tried forums with my IS300, and it's like I'd
yeah.
ask a question, and some idiot would come in and like, use the search function.
Oh, dude,
Grr.
yeah, that's why you can't do it. Even Facebook groups, the gatekeeping. I would hate to start to get into the car industry right now because of all of the past internet knowledge, and nobody has the patience for it. So like, it's just like a kid in there being like, "Hey, just kind of wondering," and everyone's like, "You idiot! You don't shouldn't have one of these cars." Yeah, use the search function. You're like, ah, okay, thank you.
Yes, like
It's a very big
helping or hurting. But like, so like, and then I'd go and use the search function, and like their search functionality is so basic that it's like, when I had the
Oh,
IS300, I was just looking for transmission options, right? Like what was affordable, what wasn't, like like just a range, right? And then like there'd be a post where a guy's talking about headlights, and then
yeah,
someone would mention transmission,
but
nothing to the point, and I'd have to sift through
yep.
hours of stuff. It's just in the Volvo community that there every community has it, but like on the C30 page specifically, there's really only like one guy who does that. And for like a solid summer, I went to war. Like, like, are you, you know, are you helping the community or are you hurting the community? Because
Dude,
like,
there's people who just okay. The other way I can do it is I had a neighbor. He's moved, but he just made it his whole thing. Is like, you know what? I love the homeowners association, and he just wanted to be like a part of it and go to the meeting. Like people just grab onto things and are like, "This is me now," and that's the same thing with like car communities. They're like, "I'm the best at this. I think I'm going to devote my life to the C30 forums or whatever else." Even Doug in the comments just said, "I might be that." He says he has 8,000 plus Sweet Speed posts, but given I have gotten a lot of good information from Sweet Speed. Given I've never posted, but I do look. I can't. I don't know. I can't. I think in the early 2000s I could have gotten into some forums more, but these these days it's just it's tough. And then the Facebook community is horrible. And remember, I'm a C4 guy. I'm in the C4 groups, and it is embarrassing. I'm like, oh boy, guys, come on. Like these are. I don't comment. I don't gatekeep, but I just look at it and I'm like, these are the kind of people that buy these cars, and
oh,
that's
it's like, oh, there was another thing when I was looking at the M3.
oh
And like,
yeah. I
like,
mentioned that in my VidWiki video about the Volvo community because I've said the Mercedes community and the BMW community, they're different because they're all like they almost love somebody having a problem because they're like, "Welcome to our world." Like they just
It's
are
like
like enjoy
another
the
one's like
pain.
shared misery, right?
They
Like
love it. They're like, ah, good. It's happening to you
it's
too.
like it's
There's no
like
helpful information. It's just going, "Ah, knew it. It's just people like rubbing it in, and you're like, okay, thanks. But like, meanwhile, the Volvo community is like, some strangers like, how out of my way can I go to help you? And you're like, well, that's different.
yeah, it's I mean, it's so like it's one of those things where it's just like come join. It's like the person who's going to sit here and tell you how great a job being an offshore oil rig operator is.
Yeah,
It's like, no, this is great. I mean, you could die, but it's no,
we're
you're
all
good.
miserable when we love it, and you're like, what?
It's like shared. It's like it's
Shared
it's
misery.
like yeah, it's the shared mis. It's like when everybody. It's almost like a clique, right? In a sense where we've
Oh, it
all.
is.
It's like you go through. You know, like, I'm sure you have this experience with people you worked with, but like going through COVID with the core group of people that you worked with, like
Yep.
that's a shared experience and stuff like that. It's
They do. They just revel in it in the German car communities, as I'm sure you were about to somewhat say.
like all I asked, the only question I ever asked there, and I was like, I don't really want to talk into this fucking thing because like after this was when I found when Rich Forsyth actually sought me out and like was like, hey, I love what you're doing. How can I help? Blah blah blah. Like blown away. That taught me a very valuable lesson. It's like when you're getting a car and you plan to modify it or restore it or something, it's find someone who knows that platform better than anyone else you know and then make them your friend. So I did it with them. But like all I was asking was, how hard is it to convert the SMG of the E46 M3 back to a traditional manual transmission? Because I was looking to like refresh a bunch of stuff because it was a high mileage car and stuff,
Sure.
and it wasn't like you know someone would pop in and be like, well, why the hell do you want to do that? Why don't you just get the manual transmission? It's like, well, because the manual transmission's 3 times the price, jackass. The
Okay.
automatics are cheaper, and from what I understand, you can take all the hydraulic whiz bangery off them and make them because it's basically the same gearbox.
It is.
And it was like 50 comments of like, I honestly thought it was people being jealous of like, why didn't I think of this?
Yeah.
Or it's like, no, you bought a BMW, therefore you should be able to afford the replacement
Right.
parts. No, that's not how.
It's so. First of all, yeah, you were a trendsetter there because now I think you just YouTube it of
Yeah,
swapping it. But it's funny. Like the only other way I can put this, the German car community down is like this. It's like low income communities where like they love to keep each other down. Like if one of them starts doing well, they start to like crap on them. And you're like, if you post, you're like, yeah, I've had no problems with my BMW whatsoever. They're like, must be nice. Not like the rest of us who are living in every day in fear of our cars and hate everything, like all this crazy stuff. But if you post something that's like shitty, they're like, good, yes, welcome to, yeah, like it's like this gang where you're like, yeah, good, that's part of the
misery
deal.
loves company.
Yeah, it's part of the deal. But anyway, the Volvo community is not like that. Is I guess the sum of
Yes.
this.
No, and
But
it's something we've said pretty.
and I have wondered, and I don't even want to get people too stirred up about this because if I was ever gonna if I get another car to replace the Volvo, it would be like a Saab Viggen because I've had such good experience with the Swedish car community. I can only imagine the Saab people are sort of the same. Um, because it's like such a small market that they're probably so excited. Like I
Yeah,
don't know, I'm just imagining because I'm that's how I imagine the Volvo people. They're like, you're paying attention to our brand, and like they get so jazzed up about it. Um, I hope the Saab people are like that. And like I said, it's not something I'm going to do tomorrow because it would I to replace something like a manual V70R, it would have to be a very special Saab. I can't just get like A93 and be like, it's fine. It's like,
get the one that's basically a Subaru. They'll love that.
oh, the Subaru. Yeah, no, they probably would not help. They're like, well, that's what you get for buying a Japanese Saab. It, it would be. I need, like I said, I know that there are is Viggen. So if I could find a Saab Viggen of some sort, that would probably be the thing. But either way, I will cross that Swedish bridge when I come to it.
Yeah. So like, let's see. Just going through. Some people are more unhinged for
Well,
some.
I was just reading that one.
I mean, I think we'll wrap it up here, and then we'll get into the
Yeah, the meat.
nuts, the meat and or potatoes of today's show, um, and that is like the vast majority of people you see in chat are either friends of yours or people we've literally met via the Volvo community. It's pretty, like, that you guys are a pretty fiercely loyal bunch. And like Mark said, there are some read the manual people. And like I said, there was, I'm not going to name names or what have you, but like one of the guys who could have been a shining beacon of C30 enthusiasm, like literally no stone unturned, built motor, the best of everything, you know, could have really just been like decided when people ask the question to, you know, and I don't like that. Like maybe when I was younger and I just wanted to start some shit, but like,
Yeah.
not now and everything like that. But so moving on.
Yes.
There we go. Moving on. So, if you saw the thumbnail, I hope it was still up after what felt like 12 attempts. Today we are going to be talking, not to take a left turn of between the Volvo Saab conversation we were just having, but like we're talking LS Coyote. And
yes.
Believe it or not, Elliott wanted to fight for the Coyote, but I guess he sees.
I was trying to get on that.
No, but obvious to anyone who's spent more than 5 minutes talking to Elliott about cars and stuff is he's kind of a Corvetteophile. Corvettes for what was it, C5, C6, and there were LSs and then the LT variants kind of came.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. I was like, the LT is still kind of an LS. It's just a direct injection LS. But
yes,
I know they changed the letter designation, so we can't bring it into.
I am fully prepared for you to use all of them. If you so desire, whether it be a truck, whether it be the an LS 1, 2,
yes.
3, 6, 7 partridge in a pushrod tree, but so Elliott is obviously the car he's a fan of has a beating heart that a lot of them, the ones we grew up on, right, the C5s, the C6s, yes. had the LS, and for me, it should come as no surprise. I'm a big fan of the Coyote. In case you haven't noticed.
Do you mean like when one of them caught on fire and you immediately got another one?
Right, but here's the fun fact. Here's the fun fact.
I know it wasn't the motor that did it.
That fire has made me hate electric cars because the battery was the thing that killed my car.
You weren't a fan before the fire. Let's clear this up. But now you're like
that's a conversation for another day. It's like literally battery killed car. Like no, but and. Obviously, there's a natural rivalry there, right? So LSs were not only in the Vet, they were in Camaros. And then everything with body on frame that GM made for 30 years.
The Coyote's in a few things, though.
The Coyote follows suit. There's not as many variants, but it does the same thing.
Yeah.
It's in the sports, the pony car, the Mustang. It's in trucks. It legitimately was the reason why people were like, yeah, the 3.5 EcoBoost is cool, but this is better. That was the EcoBoost sales were like, oh, the V8's just that much better. Something Dodge might possibly could maybe learn. So we've kind of had our lines drawn in the sand. We are also going to allow you guys to kind of put your input in.
Digital peanut gallery, please.
And we actually have, if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a poll that should have just popped up, and you could put your vote in there.
Perfect. And I will say, since they couldn't see it, Chad has also done this. So this is not like a completely unfocused tangent of us both screaming about our favorite engines. There are categories and things that he's kind of outlined so that we can discuss them in their in their correct environments.
Right. You want to make a comparison. Now, to Anthony's point in chat, LS and Coyote cannot be argued effectively. They're two different. They're both V8s, and that's where it ends. I personally, number one, the internet begs to differ because this argument happens daily. And number two, they're doing the same things. They're two engines doing the same things. They're both American V8s. Granted, as we will get into, the designs couldn't be more different, yet still utilize piston-driven internal combustion,
Right.
but they are literally the answer to the same question. So naturally, they're going to be compared to one another. Um, no, we could get down the wash of who else does similar stuff. Like we mentioned, Chrysler, Toyota does something similar with back in the day with the UR family of engines. But Ford versus Chevy, it's a rivalry as old as time. And we have some quick categories. So one of the things I didn't really want to waste too much time in is kind of out of the box, right? Like in a Camaro, in a Corvette, in a truck, in a Mustang, in a truck, or what have you. There's so many different variants, and they're all relatively performing about the same. Like the
Yes.
performance numbers are pretty close and similar. Uh, so it's really we're arguing shades of gray at that point, and not even
Yes.
arguing. I would say this is a good-natured debate where both parties
Yeah.
respect and value the opinion of the other.
Yeah. I'm gonna hang up on this stream if it gets to. I'm just gonna be like, you know what? No, and just I'm gonna do the '90s equivalent. I'm just gonna slam my laptop shut and walk away. No.
I could just throw this up and just says I love the like so.
What I'm excited about is like, so you know a lot more about Kai. I mean, I know about them, but it's gonna be interesting hearing your nuanced information that I might not have heard. About some of these specific categories, and you might like my take on the LS thing, even though I know you're probably just hearing somebody shouting at a wall, like normal. And like I said, I will say also, I did try to convince you on my list of cars for you to enter the LS world. But
I came closer than a lot of people will realize to an LS. The problem is the LS I want is the LS7.
yeah,
Um,
right. And trust me, that's going to come up because that's going to be like the whole thing where you're like, ah, yes, but you forgot about the LS7, and it's going to be
no, but I feel so. We'll get the
Let's just get in. Let's get into
we're gonna dive right into it.
Right.
So I got about
Get
five categories. Um, to Sean's point here, but the first category is affordability, swappability, right? Like
yeah.
so much of the engine argument is of an LS being where an LS shouldn't, or to a slightly less, well, a pretty significant lesser extent, Coyotes being where they shouldn't. I mean, Coyote swaps are pretty exclusive to Fords at this point.
Yeah. And I've got So go ahead and introduce it more. I can expand on this one.
So the basic premise of this is you have a chassis, you want an American V8. What are your options? Well, you have a Coyote and you have some variation of 12,000 aluminum, steel, or blocks LS.
Iron.
Yeah. The Volvo logo, so to speak. So I guess I will sit here and say, just because I don't want to take up too much time on this one, because this one's a fairly easy win. Not the direction you think I'm thinking. But Coyote swaps are becoming more and more popular as Ford understands that market more and more.
Right.
As far as getting turnkey platforms, the truck Coyotes up until 2020 or 21 were slightly different internally. Now the truck engines from 2020 and onward are the same internally. So obviously F-150, the best-selling platform in the country.
I know it is, but
it's
swayed heavily by work trucks. Just saying.
But what I'm saying is that the availability of junkyard
Yes.
Coyotes are becoming more prevalent.
It's becoming more possibility. Yeah.
But
Continue.
and I'll kind of lead you into this. Is there's really two things holding it back, and the ball is teed. Hit it out of the park, Elliott.
Well, here's the fact, and I've said this for other things, but this is like it too. So how like everybody calls a tissue a Kleenex, whether it is or not, whether it's a Puffs Plus or not. The universal engine swap term has become LS swap it, whether you like it or not. It's a household or car enthusiast name. Well, I bet that's an LS swap. How sweet would it be to LS swap that? And you can there's so many kids and stuff that'll look at a Nissan 240Z and be like, oh, imagine an LS swap one of those. It's just in the lexicon in such a way that is like, I say that's got the winner right there. Like I said, when it's the Kleenex of swaps, there you go. But The other thing is swappability. They've made a kit or something for everything I can think of. I mean, obviously Miatas, like everything. Fords, old cars, new cars. There's LS swapped everything. I mean, here in town, we even had an LS swapped Lamborghini Gallardo. So somebody took one. It's freaking sweet.
That's
It's a
that.
company that builds a lot of stuff for LS stuff, but it's like somebody took a real Lamborghini and took that and put an LS in it and it's twin turbo and stuff. It was freaking sweet. But like I said, there is a way somehow. I don't know the exact science behind it, whether it's just that much easier to mount into everything, but there is a swap kit or somebody who swapped it into everything. I mean, including even when I was still pretty young, one of my early videos, there was like a twin turbo LS swap Volvo turbo brick that was like, it was just one of those early 2000s videos where you're like, whoa, look how crazy that thing is. And it was because it was LS swapped. Now, a lot of this is because of the affordability and the prevalence of the motor. Um, I don't know the exact cost crate for crate of that. I know the Coyote is more expensive. Um,
Yeah,
but
quite a bit.
the fact that they put the LS and everything that falls under the LS blanket. I mean, as you see, these people have just put LSX because there's too many. Like you can't even just say like, oh, it's this.
Right.
It's in the family. Whether you get a 5.3 from a van, or a 6.0 from a Corvette or Camaro. There's so many variants of it, and I mean every Yukon, Tahoe thing out there technically is a few things away from being a Corvette motor.
Right. And I don't mean to make your argument for you, but you could go out and find a 4.8, a 5.3, a 6.0 iron block, and with, redo the studs, put good heads on it, like you said, you're not too many steps. I will gladly admit that the LS is narrower. It volumetrically, as far as the physical thing, takes up less
It's
space.
lower. Thank you, push rods.
It
I know we'll
does
get into
have
that.
it does have a lower CG, but as we'll get into when we
I
start
know.
talking about big power, really the weight goes
I
up.
know, but
But
as far as swappability goes, that's a big thing.
oh
Being able to
well,
fit in so many different hood
absolutely.
lines without having to get a cowl is big.
Yes, I completely agree. I will fully admit that when it comes to if we all took a poll and what everyone was driving here, what would it be easier to put in an LS or a Coyote? It would be an LS, and the LS would be more affordable. That's kind of why the LS
Right.
has become the Kleenex of engine swaps.
It's the Kleenex of swaps. Yeah, and like I said, I think that's why we don't need to beat this horse too much.
Yep.
Now that being said, and we will get into this more, I do love a Coyote swap. Like I get excited when I see a Coyote swap like Fox. That's super cool. Because it still is a 5.0. It's still got the badging and stuff. And you get on there, you're like, cool, modern power plant. Like an IRS swapped, Coyote swapped, like notchback. So cool to me. Um, I've gotten to drive a couple of Resto Mod Broncos that were Coyote swapped. It's like I love modern Ford power in an older Ford platform if you're going to do the Resto Mod because I do not like an LS swapped Bronco. It's not wrong. I like to keep it in the
No,
family.
I do agree with that. I do agree with like a
But for some
Chevy
reason, LS
should.
swapped almost anything else is like not that big of a deal. Like it's a weird like double standard that I have because I
Well,
don't
it's
mind it. Yeah,
it's kind of like 2J swapping in a GTR,
right.
you
Yeah,
know,
it kind of is. Yeah,
which
you're
has
like, well,
happened. But no, it's look. I mean, number one, the LS has been around longer, so there's just way more of them. The aftermarket is insane. You don't have to go very far to find literally all the parts you need. They're just, it is what it is. LS swapping, Kleenex of engine swaps.
it's the Kleenex of swaps.
Moving
So,
on.
moving on.
Next up is we're going to start talking. The next few are going to be power potential. So we're going to talk NA first and then move on from there. So NA power, well, here's where it gets. So
It is interesting.
here's what I'll say for NA horsepower, right? So if you look at beast for beast, so what's the biggest crate version of an LS I can buy directly from Chevy, and what's the baddest NA Coyote I can buy from Ford? number one, the Coyote is the Illuminator, and it's over $20,000. So again, that's the affordability, which we gave to the LS. But that Illuminator's 580 horsepower. I think when they brought back the LS7, it was a little less than that. That being said, there, when it comes to NA horsepower, displacement does kind of reign supreme. Now the Coyotes, you can get up over 600 horsepower if built bottom end, a stroker kit, you know, either a port and polish on stock heads or simply just swapping out the Voodoo heads, which are among the best heads ever designed for an American engine, which we'll get to.
Good head.
Always good head. Here's the thing: you can make a ton of horsepower if you're willing. If E85 is something that is accessible, you can make a cross-plane Coyote rev past 8,500 RPM, and it's making power the whole way, which, from a driving experience, is a little bit more exciting.
Yes.
That said, the reason I wanted the LS7, i.e. C6Z06, is those things can go well over 600, and you don't have to touch the rotating assembly.
Right. So, here's what I'll step in. Now, if you brought in the Illuminator, I will say I forgot the name of it, but we do have, and I believe it's technically an LS, that 1,000 horsepower NA thing. That I remember, I think, I don't think it was Donut. It might have been, it's one of those guys. They put it in a Camaro, and it was, I mean.
Oh, you're talking Hoonigan.
Yeah, Hoonigan. Yes. Yeah, you're right. But it is technically an option. Like I said, I forgot what the name of it is. I think at the end of the day, it's still LS architecture.
You're thinking of the 632, and that is based on Chevy big block architecture.
Okay, so
which I understand with push rods and one. I mean,
it
shaft.
is. That's when you walk in that whole thin line of like what makes it an LS. I mean, yeah,
it's not an LS. It's not an LS block.
It's not an LS. But now here's the other thing though, that is interesting that you guys don't have, because I don't know what you guys call the GT500 motor, but what we do have on the LS side is a couple of variations of forced induction LS that are out of the box. I mean, it's not somebody putting a Pro Charger on it. I mean, the LS9 is factory supercharged. The LSA in the ZL1 and Cadillac CTS-Vs, factory supercharged. Now, I know that that's kind of not fair. And I think we are talking about naturally aspirated modability anyway. But the point is, yeah, I think what you're saying was right about the LS7. Displacement is king. 7 liters. Pretty sweet. And like I said, you get that iconic 427 things to it. Now, naysayers out there will say, well they drop valves. Well, they didn't at first. There was a thing that people figured out later. And it's a solvable issue. It's like the BMW rod bearing thing. It's just like, yeah, you just know it's a possibility to do the preventative maintenance. But having driven more than a handful of C6 Z06s, which I love, which is also why I wanted you to get one, it delivers power in such a way that is just intoxicating. Like, I mean, it's probably, aside from, which is not part of the argument, aside from the high revving flat plane crank like Ferraris and stuff that I've driven, it's just one of the best naturally aspirated engines I've ever driven. I mean, it's somehow, no matter what RPM, what gear you're in, you have all of the power you could ever want in the world. And I've driven, higher horsepower cars, but there's something about the delivery of an LS7 that is unlike anything else. I mean, like I said, you're in 6th gear on the highway, just stomp it. You don't even need to downshift, and that thing will put you back in the seat. It's insane what it can do. And like I said, we weren't even at if you made that same motor like from the drawing board again today with what we have, who knows what it could do. I mean, that was still coming out of the dark ages of how do we make a lot of horsepower and still pass emissions. I mean, and this was at the time that made more horsepower than what was it? They were really excited. The Ford, obviously by a tiny bit. Ford was super excited about it was the most powerful road engine ever in the Ford GT. And then GM came out with a little bit more horsepower, naturally aspirated. And it was like,
Right.
It was like, that's wild. I mean, it was like 1 year apart. I mean, the Z06 came out in 2006, and the Ford GT, obviously, it's a totally different car. I'm just saying, it's wild what they were able to do when it took Ford a big ass supercharger to make that kind of power, and GM was like, check this out, and made that. And I mean, obviously, it's an iconic motor for that reason. Um, it's they're just impressive, reliable engines. And I've had a few people, even older cars. My buddy's C5Z06, the one that we took to like Blue Ridge Parkway and stuff like that. I think it was 490 horsepower, naturally aspirated, with like heads cam intake. Like not crazy. Uh,
Yes.
like not a whole lot. Like that's not really. That's pretty much bolt-ons.
Well, I mean,
Pretty much.
in the again, we'll get there, but those have to be bolt-ons
Yes.
for the LS. Like,
And then the thing is like there's that, and then you go and you're like, okay, well, what's the latest iteration of the Coyotes? Like 480 horsepower already out of the box.
right. Well,
So
here's the thing.
you know,
The way the Coyotes are built, again, you're getting 480, but the mother of all Coyotes, NA, is the Illuminator, and
which is
that's
such a good name.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Now there's like multiple versions of the Illuminator. So the Gen 4 Coyote that just came out is the Illuminator blah, and then you have the Illuminator XS 580 or whatever, which is
Of course,
oddly enough the horsepower it makes.
as it should be.
You know, the one thing I will say here, and this may become something of a reoccurring theme from me, is that to get as high as you can does not require as much aftermarket. So
On the Coyote end is what you're saying.
yes. So anytime you're chasing like the most power, right? NA obviously it's got to breathe better. So heads and cams
Right.
are almost necessities because you have to make that's the only way you're getting more air into the engine, right?
Right. And I feel like you're also working with 4 times the cams.
Well, yeah, I mean 4 times the or double the valves as it were.
Double the valves. I mean, like, so there
We
is
also
more,
have,
yeah.
and this again will come up, is variable valve timing, continuously variable valve timing,
Yeah. That's
everything.
That's nice.
And we have so to get kind of really, so you can use like an HP tuner on a stock GM computer, but a lot of people end up going with like a low end Holly just because it just works better. What I'm
Right.
saying is that the level at which you need to go is more, but on the flip side, your starting price is lower. So you have like let's say
Right.
you have a budget. So
If you had the
kind of
same
moves on.
budget and you'd have a lot more money for mods on the LS side, assuming dollar for dollar.
To echo your point,
Engine procurement price.
yes.
Mods.
And not for nothing, we're not living in a world where like an LS or Coyote just falls into our lap and then we can start modifying, right? Like budgets
I'd
are
like
a
to
thing
live
for.
in that. I'd like to live in that world.
I mean, technically speaking, I have 2 Coyotes, but
Yeah.
and I think it would be hilarious to annoy people is to get like an old like an automatic C6 base model,
Oh.
throw a Coyote in it.
Oh.
And it just because of the annoyance.
I mean,
GM's
as a
putting
Corvette
dual
guy,
overhead cam
I would
engines
love it.
in
I
the
would just
Corvette
be so
now.
excited to be like, dude, I can't believe somebody made this work because I would appreciate the craftsmanship.
Right. Well,
the
making
way
it
it's
fit between the frame rails would be the biggest thing because the heads.
And
the heads
you would have
are-
to put a cowled hood on that because those engines sit low in those cars. And well, I mean, even if they put a supercharger on it, they're like, oh shit, we got to put a little bit of a bump on this hood.
Right.
Let alone imagine the whole thing sitting up this high.
Well, yeah, it would be a matter of how low could you put that engine in. Well, really, like any swap.
And then
Would it
converting it to a torque tube type deal because you guys are used to having the transmission right there. Corvettes, it's a transaxle, and you know.
Yeah,
I mean, listen, I would be impressed, and I would not be mad about it.
You know, well, where's the clutch on? Is the clutch at the back of the engine, or is it at the back of the torque tube?
It's at the. I think it's still at the back of the engine, which is why it's called a torque tube, not a drive shaft.
Okay. I
But
mean, either way, like
it is the
there's
same
ways
thing. I know.
there's ways to figure it out. Like you're
But
basically now
well,
putting instead of a
because all I know is if you do have to change a clutch in a C6 and up, you have to drop the whole rear cradle, which is no different than my Maserati. But yeah,
yeah.
you're not
Well, I
supposed
mean, not to get too far in the woods, but at the end of the day, you're spline for the drive shaft versus the spline for. Oh man, it's something I would like to do, and I have a spare engine and transmission. But in
Dude,
any rate,
so I should have just sent you ratty C6s.
I mean that's kind of how my brain operates. But with my car now, my current Mustang, the black one, we are down two very distinct paths on what that car could be. It's now the minutia of how do I make this path or this path work? What do I want in the long run? So we're working on that. I will be releasing a couple videos on that car soon where I kind of talk out what I kind of want to do. There's one path that's probably like 85-90% the path that's going to happen. Then there's the 10% of like, I want this to happen so bad, but it's just so expensive. And then that kind of brings me with kind of a base spoiler to it is there's a point with NA that you reach where the money you're putting in is just, once you get to a point where you're, taking the heads off and putting intake manifolds and throttle bodies and trying to tune all this stuff. At the end of the day, to get to that same point, boost is a much better option.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just like that's why bolt-ons are bolt-ons, because you get pretty big gain for very little effort, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, I put new springs on and do all, and it's like you didn't really, it's like there's so many little things you can do, and it's like, well, it's high effort, little gain, and so that's why people are like, well, 7 psi of forced air kind of helps a little bit.
Well, that's exactly it, and I will say this before we get into what should shockingly be the next category, honestly. But there is a allure to high horsepower NA.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's one of the things that has bitten me on multiple occasions. I wanted to do an NA2J on my IS 300 before Volvo Life grabbed me. I really like the idea of an NA Coyote. It's just we know what the max is on that before you start getting into things like, well, shoot, we got to make the engine bigger, displacement wise. So naturally, the in almost all cases, and I'm not saying this to be self-serving or anything, boost is a more prudent direction because you get more for about the same. If you do and you don't. And that leads me into my argument of boosted power potential. And we're going to be talking here factory bottom end. So we're not swapping out rotating parts. This is something that theoretically someone with a reasonable budget could do as opposed to someone who's...
And they do all the time, which is good.
Most people aren't taking and building the motor unless it's one of those...
Unless they're actually racing it. If you're just wanting more power quickly, you're running stock internals. You just are.
Right. And that's where I think between that and the head design, like we mentioned, this is where we start, because right now it's 2-0 LS, and I will happily
that's a good question that Sean just asked while we're on NA still. Has anyone done individual throttle bodies on a Coyote?
Yes, Borla.
Borla did throttle bodies.
Mm-hmm.
The exhaust company.
Yes, they did.
They went to the front of the engine.
They did, and
slash the top, whatever.
And there's a couple other companies that do it. It's
I love it. So, I mean, I'm a big velocity stack guy, so I do love it.
The thing of it is, and again, this proves what we're talking about. I believe they were $8,000 to $9,000, and the power gains were pretty minimal.
Minimal, I'm sure, but how cool?
I mean, comparatively speaking, right? Like versus like a Cobra Jet, you're picking up like 30 horsepower. That's a lot in the NA game.
Oh, dude, that's crazy.
As opposed to changing the pulley on a supercharger and getting 100, and that's what, $70, $100. It is something it is some.
Yeah.
But the thing is with Coyotes when it comes to high NA horsepower is revs. Horsepower is torque over time.
You guys
And
have the revs.
well, what I'm saying is you have to get up there. And once you start getting up there in revs, you have to start adjusting any engine, whether it be a Coyote, whether it be an LS, whether it be a Volvo 5-cylinder. Once you get up into the upper echelon of RPM, you reach a point where you need to start thinking of more quote-unquote performance fuels, so E85.
Right.
Because you have to almost run the ignition, and it's very precise, but you have to run the ignition timing advanced in such a way to where it's the piston speed at like 8,000 is ridiculous. So that thing has to advance to such a point when you start advancing timing to a certain degree, and I know we're going down a rabbit hole of engines here, but then you start really risking knock.
Right.
And so that's where boost comes into the equation. And again, where the Coyote shines. You mentioned the LS9 before.
Right. And I mean, obviously it's kind of almost a trump card as far as a thing. And you can get them, or you could get them as crate motors.
You can get an LS9 crate motor just like you can get a Predator crate motor, which is the GT500 slash Raptor R motor. Right. And we're talking 760 horsepower just out of the box. Base pulley. Right. People are changing the pulley, putting long tubes on it, and changing the tune and getting 800 wheel out of them.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like, I mean, and not to bring this into, it's like the Hellcat. I mean, like I said, I was in the Hellcat community for a long time. My Hellcat was, a pulley, intake, headers away from 1,000 horsepower and a tune. It's insane. It's cheating. When you just have this much air moving through this much stuff already, and you just tweak it a little bit, and it's insane.
Right, and I'm sure there's some. Since you mentioned it, there's a buddy of mine who watches these shows. He's like, "Well, what about the Gen 3 Hemi? Different show. Moving on."
Yeah, I know. So I'm saying I don't want to bring Hemis into it, but I was just saying it's from that, like, being in that, the only out of the box supercharged car I've owned was like I said. It was just like, well, why don't you put a pulley to you'll be 1,000 horsepower? I was like, I don't know, because I mean I could, and I like the ability that I can, but. The question here specifically on this is, it's boosted power potential with the factory bottom end, and obviously with the Predator motor, that's pretty crazy. There's been a lot
we'll get to with the Predator, but
there's been a lot of people, and I would say there's been a lot of successful ZR1 people because that's the only thing that the LS9 just came in. But a derivative of it is the LSA, and there's been a lot of people having amazing luck with that. Crazy mods. I mean, the bottom end was usually never touched in these, and we're talking, like I said, again, quadruple number horsepower number ZR1s with, like I said, a few things. I mean, obviously it's gonna be E85 and or meth injected, whatever else. But as far as things out of the thing, it's modability, stock bottom end, factory supercharged car. They are insane. And even honestly, even the stock blowers are really good. Like, they're still really, like, I didn't see a lot of guys not running the stock blower on even an LSA or an LS9, because you can just turn, they're not underrated from the horsepower, but they're so understressed out of the box that you can crank them way up with like no real downside. And like I said, with all the other supporting mods, 85 meth, name it. These engines are good for so much, and they're so reliable still.
As a counterpoint, stock bottom end, stock heads, stock cams, Gen 2, so 11-to-1 compression, 705 at the tire in my old car. Like, that's where when you start
badass.
And in the Gen 3, spoiler alert, the bump in compression. There is a minuscule bump in displacement between a Gen 2 and a Gen 3. Almost, we're talking several cc. We're not talking like 100 cc, right? Just in the compression ratio alone, that so they make 460 from the factory. The Gen 2 made 435. That percentage gain follows with boost. So we're mid to potentially upper 700 range on a stock never intended to be supercharged or turbocharged. Picture an LS3. To get even close to 700 wheel, cam, completely different head, springs, retainers. You're again, and you're probably going with an intake manifold. Does mine have a different intake manifold than it did from factory? Yes. Is it a
but I mean,
Ford
that's
part?
not making the big, that's not making the biggest difference in the world. It's
But for
the
mine,
other stuff.
it's a Ford part. It's literally something I can walk into the dealership and order. So you see, the Coyotes, they're making. Wait, so if we take the boosted from factory out of the equation just for a second, I'm not trying to eliminate them, but if you look at like all the variations of the NALSs, and usually when you're introducing boost into the equation and you're looking for bigger power, sleeves on LSs generally have to at least be part of the conversation, especially if you're pushing that 700 wheel number.
And I will say the caveat on that: usually, if you're actually going to go boosted aftermarket on a naturally aspirated LS, a lot of the guys go for the iron block stuff in the first place. So they will get a junkyard like truck motor rather than start. They'll actually take the aluminum block out of a Corvette, put an iron block in.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, look at Cletus did that with almost every single one of his.
It's just what you do.
It's just what you do. But in the sense of you have that option sitting over here in the family of vehicles, I can do the same with an aluminum block
without doing that. Yeah.
So I would and the trump card to the Coyote, and it seems obvious, is the head design. And I think this is kind of a good spot to segue into. Now we're talking biggest, baddest, do whatever you want, but it has to start life as an LS. It has to start life as a Coyote. What are the biggest and the baddest doing power-wise? What are they doing it with? And I will sit here and say there aren't many LS-powered cars in the 6-second range, let alone a bunch of LS-powered cars. Look up the Lund Racing Gray, I think it's either the Grey Goose or the Blue Goose. It's the one they're currently racing. This car right here, it runs in the sixes, well into the sixes, quarter mile. It makes 2,500 horsepower. It has a block you can roll. It has a Predator block. So a block you can literally walk down to Ford and be like, yo, I'll have one of these. It is sleeved, but we're not talking a billet block. It's a factory block that's slightly modified.
Yeah. I do want to say it's very funny, back to the Volvo conversation. My Volvo needs sleeves if I want more than 300 horsepower.
Yeah.
Which is so, it's hilarious, the discrepancy between these two motors. Like, I mean, I'm over here fighting realize it's not the same thing. And everyone's always like, man, you're going to make 350 horsepower. You better sleeve that thing. It's like, geez,
or at least put shims in it.
It's not even that intense. And it's like,
right. I mean, well, that's a difference in.
I know. It's hilarious that you're like, you might want to think about sleeving an LS or a Coyote once you get up to a 1,500 horsepower. You're like, might think about it. Yeah. And it's like with Volvo, you're like, oh boy, 310? You should probably sleeve that thing.
Yeah.
It's just funny how the design, I know, there's a lot more into it than that. It is hilarious, we have to admit.
Right. Oh, without a question, because it was very similar.
The threshold of sleeveness is so funny.
Well, it's, I mean, or just look at the different. Granted, the architecture is completely different, right? But like, look at the difference between the Audi 2.5 liter 5-cylinder that's in like the TTRS or the RS3.
The RS3, which is, by the way, an insane motor,
an insane engine, technically still 2.5 liters, right?
Yeah, and those guys are making 1,000 horsepower with like nothing. Yeah, it's insane. And it's like, well, they did it, but it's like, Volvo's like, careful if you want to make close to 400 horsepower, this thing's gonna throw a rod. You're like, oh my God.
Yeah, but their whole thing is longevity and reliability.
I know.
So it's just open deck.
It's just funny because and especially as an owner of both, it's not an Audi, but like as an owner of American stuff and a Volvo, it's just like
Right, like it's one of those things. Like you guys did make a little powerhouse
Yeah,
before the white
and then they're
blocks.
also like, and also the Americans are like, we designed this back in the '90s, and it's still like fine. And you guys are like, this is a brand new design, 2004. Let's do this. We have all the
Yeah,
technology to make things as good as possible. And you're like, you guys had a 10-year jump and are like sweating at over 300 horsepower.
right. Like,
It's
or
just
like
funny.
not
Anyway,
for nothing. It's the just for you guys. It's
it just
literally
is
a
funny.
push rod V8, two valve, no VV, no variable valve,
No,
not like it's
no witchcraft, nothing. It's just that's what I love
so
about it.
well. That's the
But
great
I
thing
think
about
it
cars.
just cracked me up that you mentioned it was like it is sleeved, and I'm like I know, and everybody just tells me if I want to put an intake on my car that I should get it sleeved. Meanwhile, like it's like this guy's pushing probably 88 millimeter turbos, all this other crap that's going and putting pressure on this motor, and you're like you should probably sleeve it. And you're like yeah, but anyway,
Yeah.
uh,
But
no. So as far as the best thing, now I will say this: no, you finish your point, and I've got another
well,
thing.
there's so we're talking ultimate. Now we're into motorsports, obviously, and the like I said, I think I have the car above this, but the Lund car they are using again a stock block with sleeves. They're using voodoo heads that aren't even ported. They're to use John Lund's exact phrasing. They're lightly polished. So basically, just taking some of the smoothing out the intake runners. They are also doing all of this. I think they went 670 or 660. Once you're into the mid six, like once you're under 7, above 6, like things hauling, and they're doing it all on a stock computer.
Now that is impressive. The fact that you can make that much horsepower and not be on a standalone is really impressive.
He has a lot of data logging modules, but
Of course. Well, I
But-
mean, I didn't think he was just going. He was just letting the stock computer figure it out.
and the so a lot of these guys who are pushing 2,500 horsepower are still doing it with all the components I mentioned before, and a factory Coyote Cayman production Mustang's crankshaft. Granted, it was the Boss 302 crankshaft, which not to go down too deep of a Coyote rabbit hole, but fuck it, it's LS versus Coyote, might as well.
You gotta.
The arguably the most impressive and sort of unicorn version of the Coyote is one of their first, which is crazy to me. Is the Boss 302 just I don't know exactly, but those things, if you wanted to handle bigger power, I think they have forged pistons, which makes and forged rods, which again.
But if it came that way, that's okay. So that's what we're arguing right now.
And you're well into the sixes with pretty much parts you can go down to Ford and buy. And I know there are 6-second LSs out there.
There's several 6-second LSs out there.
They're-
Larry Larson, same kind of deal. That's a drag week, S10, big turbos, big everything. That's an LS all
Right.
day long.
But it's probably got PRC or some other form of aftermarket. Oh, did I also mention that the Lund car is running on stock? I think they're Predator camshafts, also. So, and he keeps variable valve on the exhaust side. On it.
Can we talk about cam phasers, or that's like a no-no, like the LS7 valve drop?
I mean, every engine has that sort of
I know,
design
I
type
know.
of, so here's the thing.
We're not getting into that. I just think it's funny because you have so many of the camshafts, unlike me, with just the one in the middle doing
Right.
push rodding.
Right, but where that little thing likes to pivot, it doesn't like to do that in
I know.
certain
Well, it's also
situations.
because we've got this long stick that's
Yeah.
doing something, and that doesn't like flexing a lot. So I get it.
So every engine kind of has that stuff. I mean, you could look at it and you can go down and, oil pump gears on the powdered, but there's
One
stuff
thing
out there.
I do want to ask on this because it's not for the big power argument, but do you consider the Voodoo still a Coyote?
Oh, 100%, because it's a Coyote. They're literally,
I know it's a flat plane crank Coyote, basically.
I mean, would you consider an LS with a flat plane crank in, say, an LS3 block, still an LS variant? You're still using
Yes. but that would be like, I mean, that's like there are people who've done it, but it's like
No, I'm
such an
talking about if they
insane.
did it from factory.
Oh, yeah, I mean, but also the thing is, GM would still call it a L something. You
Because
know, I mean, think about it. They call the LT2, and then like the LT5 is a dual overhead cam V8, and they're like, yeah, still an LT, which again is just a
I mean,
direct injected LS. So whatever.
right. Well, I mean, so all right. So since this now the second
Anyway,
time
I know
we've
I was just
mentioned the
curious
L,
because the thing is,
the
I
LT,
know
I
The
consider them
Voodoo doesn't handle big power, but I love that motor because
well.
of
So after
everything else that it has.
2019 and after, they actually started putting Predator. They gave the Voodoos Predator blocks, and that solved some of the oil
It solved
consumption.
the oiling issues. Okay, I was gonna say, I was like,
Um,
that's part of the problem because this is what
but
brought it up for
no,
me.
but I will sit here and tell you that if you were to take the new flat plane Corvette engine and compared it to say the LS9 or an LSA or a factory boosted LS, I would wager that those factory LS, specifically the rods, would survive more power than the flat plane stuff, because flat plane stuff is all about piston speed. It's all about
Uh,
RPM. It's
It
all
is,
about that stuff. So a lot of
and
that
I was
stuff is
even yeah.
sacrificed. But you can still make about 800. You could still make pretty decent power on it. But if you want the maximum Coyote build, you start with a Predator block. You put a GT, a Boss 302 crankshaft in it, Voodoo heads. You can. There are aftermarket cams that still keep variable valve or what have you, but you don't even need to go that far with boost because of the way the heads are designed and the way they flow. So now we're talking about stuff you can literally 90% of your engine you can order from Ford. Where the Chevrolet argument is that stuff still available? Yes, but you have to go to aftermarket A for your heads, aftermarket B for your camshaft,
That
aftermarket
is true.
C
That
for
is
your
nice.
crank,
That is nice.
aftermarket like this. So, from a standpoint of can they get to the same spot? Also, since again, I didn't mean to make it sound like there were no LSs in the sixes. There are plenty of LSs in the sixes. However, a lot of them on the
But they've
Dragon
got
Drive stuff are getting their
right.
doors kicked in by a little car named Snot Rocket, and that is a Coyote.
Okay, now let me have my piece here. I want to address the first thing, even though it's not technically in the argument we're talking about. The fact is, with the LT5 versus an LS9, driven both cars, um, around town or just your everyday drivability, the LS9 feels so much faster. It's insane with what is 50 less horsepower. Yeah, it's not that much, but it's insane. But what is impressive about the LT5 is that the outgoing motor that it replaced in the C7 Z06 was 650 horsepower supercharged. The LT5 makes it 670 naturally aspirated, which is just awesome. What a good step up to be like more power, no power adder needed. It's an
Yeah, who
impressive
knew
motor.
copying Ferrari was a good idea?
Yeah, it's almost like they've been trying to do that since the beginning. But anyway, it's a great motor, and like I think I even said it last stream. One of the things it's if you have the opportunity to do it, an absolute like the car hasn't run in 3 days. A C8 Z06 cold start, it freaking take your breath away. It is insane the first time I heard it because like I've heard a million Ferrari cold starts by the grace of God, but this was how America did a Ferrari cold start. They're like we heard that.
Well, they took a
458.
flat
That
plane
was
and made a big block out of it. Like,
they
you know,
literally did. They were like, no, that 458 sounded pretty cool. Watch this, and it's the same sound up to 11. I mean, seriously, things like wow, it sounds exactly like a Ferrari. Like I said, if somebody hooked it up to an amplifier, it is insane.
well, we do like a loud cold start here in this country.
Yeah, so it's freaking awesome.
The one thing I will say about that engine is that's like comparing the Coyote to the Godzilla, though.
Yeah, and then the only reason I'm even, and I don't even want to broach this because they teased it again, I believe yesterday, it might have been the day
Yep,
before.
the twin turbo
The CR
version.
one's coming up, and it's going to have a twin turbo version of the LT5. So we've got a high revving, already 670 horsepower, naturally aspirated car. You throw two turbos at that thing, it's gonna be an absolute monster.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I even know just from the difference of again, due to the fortune of like driving a 458, which is widely regarded as like the best last
Oh, I would
Ferrari,
100%. Everything after
Good.
that, with the possible
Absolutely
exception
amazing.
of LaFerrari.
But I'm telling you, that same thing, the 488, it's not that far off, just with the addition of two turbos, and the power difference is like holy shit when you drive. If you, especially if you're driving back to back, one, like I said, one's like, oh, this is really great, and you really wrap it out, and it's great, like a Voodoo, like a GT350. You drive the 488, and you're like, oh my goodness. I mean, this thing will make your jaw drop at 30 miles an hour punching it. It's insane. But that's not what we're really talking about here. What we're talking about is big power LS Coyote. And I think people were doing, well, obviously, due to the fact that it's existed since 97, people have been doing big power LSs way before big power Coyotes because they had quite a big age jump on them.
That
But
and Ford likes to do this thing where it's like, hey, here's our new toy engine. You can't touch it for 2 years.
right. Well,
Like the
it's not
F-150.
like Chevy doesn't do that. The C8, people were trying to put power adders on that, and nobody could figure out nobody can unlock the ECU. So, I mean, like Amelia Hartford's C8 was like, she had like one of the first twin turbo things. It was just running on like hopes and dreams because nobody could do anything with the ECU. So it's the same thing. Now you can, but it's like really expensive. It's not like open source software or anything like that.
Right. I mean, that's where.
Race cars aside, though, I want to say, and I know this, and given, I would love to hear from the comments here, and I don't even want to open up the can of worms of the John Hennessy conspiracy thing here, but the fact is there's a lot of confirmation that the original Hennessy Venom GT was largely LS based. And at one point, that was, for a brief second, like the fastest car in the world. Now, I know it's not a race car. I know it's not, this or that, whatever. But it was like, at the end of the day, it was still an LS with some turbos on it. And it, right in the right platform, was able to do that. And I think that is worth it. I also think the SSC Aero from the early 2010s also was somewhat LS based. And I know I'm saying that loosely on purpose because they said somewhat LS based. At some point, some part of the rotating assembly on that car
There was
an
metal
LS.
that was intended to be an LS that
Yes.
never actually became one.
So I just said loosely, but I mean, if we're going that,
No,
it's
I
not
totally.
the same as what you can say because you guys have that. Like, I mean, the best Ford GT parts, which again we're not talking about. I watched Super Speeders back today. They did Ford Racing pulley, Ford Racing headers, and Ford Racing something else, and it made the car transform. And those were Ford dealership available parts. Now we have GM Performance, and I've seen my buddy's dad, same guy who I got my first C60R1 drive from. He had, which again LS based, a gas Sierra Denali back in the day, and it had GM Performance headers, GM Performance this, GM Performance that. And I mean, that thing would walk away from stuff, and it was like holy crap, and those were dealership warrantyable parts. And no, it's not quite the same thing as what you were talking about with a 6-second dragster or anything like that. But this is kind of more of that every man's what's available from the factory.
Well, that's the thing. That's the part of the point I'm trying to make with the fact that they went this fast. I think the fastest Coyote, or at least the fastest Coyote in a street car, which is a muddy, muddy, muddy water.
That is a muddy water.
Street car as it's defined by your Texas 2Ks, your World Cups, your Florida 2Ks, etc. Is, I mean, I think the most, fast forward race engines, the most that they've gotten out of one of their built Coyotes. And again, it's, the thing of it is that you're talking everyman. Well, everyman can go out and say, you can go on a Lethal Performance and get Voodoo heads. You can go out and you can get, you could find a Predator block. Now, again, it goes back to our original thing of...
Can you find a child Predator block, though?
I hope... Well, if you do...
you could. There's a lot of red dots on that map.
Yeah, I prefer, the Predator that fought aliens and Arnold. But...
I know, but in today's lexicon, you got to be careful. They'll be like, dude, Predators are awesome. That's the thing. You have to admit, as far as naming goes, you're like, our badass footer is called the Predator. And everyone's like, oh, God, I don't want one of those on my street. And you're like, I know.
Well, because it'll dust everything. But like the point I'm making is that you like parts
God,
accessibility.
That, by the way, you can have full rights to that meme. Like, there's a new Predator on my block, and just put a little red pin over like a GT 500.
Or it's oh my gosh, it would be a horrible
Dude, it'd be so
skit.
good.
But it's like,
full
it's
rights to
like
that meme,
it's
you
like
can
to
have
do
it.
like, you remember the old British like Ford commercials and like the comedic gold that they were, like the Ford Ka, Ka.
Oh, yeah, no,
where like the bird,
the hood that hit the bird,
yeah, or like the fact that like an animal or a cat was trying to get in through the sunroof and it started closing the sunroof. Like,
oh yeah,
these
yeah.
old like things. It's like you just have someone knock on the door and it's be like, "Hi, my name's so and so. I just moved in. I'm obligated to let you know I do have a Predator," and it's just the Mustang in the background.
That's the GT 500, and you're like, "I'm sorry, I'm going to try to keep it to myself as much as possible," which is a good advertisement for quiet neighbor mode.
Yes, I totally agree. And
see, if Ford should lean into the Predator thing, then if you're going to name it, then be like, "F it, we're going for it." Which, by the way, I will say, and I know I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent here, but I've driven a GT 500. I don't know if you have had the fortune yet, the new one. Absolutely amazing. And it really is whisper quiet on quiet neighbor mode. I was like, oh, come on, how much can you hush this thing up? And it turns out, I mean, almost entirely. It's like
that's one of the.
It's eerie how much you can make it quiet. And you're like, this thing absolutely screams when the valves are open. And like I said, it's got like, it must have 3 modes of open, closed, and like double closed. Because I mean, on quiet neighbor mode, insane. It's quieter than a Tahoe. Like, it's.
I can't remember exactly but I think there's actually some engine mapping in there that I can't remember off the top of my head, so I don't want to dive too much into it. But
and like I said, the first time I did it, like, because I did it, and I remember, well, when I was married, my ex-wife, she would get mad because if I had to leave in the morning, my Hellcat, the garage where like our master is like, it's not right above, but it doesn't matter. The Hellcat cold start, if it was like 7 a.m. or something, that was just blah, and it's dead stock. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, Coyotes do have a fairly
like,
aggressive.
Can you knock it off? And I'm like, I can't knock it. There's no knocking this off. And she was always like, God, you woke me up at the freaking house. Well, I mean, given I'm not married anymore, so I'm not starting down this road. I'm just saying, it was this whole like, I was like, I can't. But if I had a quiet neighborhood, it wouldn't have been a problem. And it really is like, because Hellcats had this thing, you're like, oh, it's a valved exhaust, and I'm like, is it? Because like it's just kind of always loud, and I don't ever hear it get louder. It just is always like, and I even saw a picture of it. The valve is like, it looks like a washer, like there's still a hole in it. It never really diverts like other exhausts, like on Corvettes. I know, Corvette talk again. You can always see behind C6s and C7s that have the valved exhaust. 2 of them are black, and the other 2 are chrome because they're never open. And it's just funny because like it really does. When the valve's shut, it diverts it through another set of pipes. And with the Hellcat, it was the same set of pipes with like one thing in there that was like kinda did something, but whatever Ford did, holy crap, they mastered it. And then, like I said, with Corvettes, you put that thing on tour, it's crazy. And I always make it because you can just hear it on idle. And I'll even do it on like the auction that I'm driving. If somebody's doing it, you just twist it from like tour street race, and you can hear it go blah blah blah, blah, and then like go back to quiet. You can just keep twisting it like a volume knob, and you can hear it move up and down. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah,
oh, now the voting is initiated. Just now.
Well, it's been live this whole time. It's just
it said voting's ended. I never got to vote. Well,
did it say voting ended? Because it shouldn't. No, it's still open.
I just saw it pop up, and I was like, "Oh, I can vote."
Yeah, as well.
No,
okay. The thing is, when it comes to, I think overall, when it comes to making ultimate horsepower, and I'll even sit here and say that there's several sources. So, what the hell? I'm gonna blank on it, but
are you citing sources? Are you giving me a bibliography right now?
Well, I did do a fair extensive amount.
I know you did. I'm just saying
research on this, and I have a lot of like memory just from like Hey, I looked this up
because it's discrediting everything that I've said. You're like, well, back in this publication, this person
Well, no,
said.
it's not even that. It's the guy. I forget the guy's actual name, but he's based. If you watch the Cletus videos, he's Dr. Tunamo, and he said on a recent Cooper Bogetti podcast, when it comes to like a lot of the stuff he's working, because he's a big LS guy. With a lot of stuff he's working on, with a lot of stuff he's tuning on, if you want to get any sort of longevity out of an LS, whether it be steel or cast iron, aluminum, what have you.
But if they made an LS out of steel, game over.
I mean, they're making iron block Coyotes now that you just don't go in anything because they're making 3,400 horsepower on aluminum blocks. Like,
sleeved. I'm just kidding.
go sleeve the Volvo and make like 4% of that.
Go sleeve the Volvo and make a reliable 350. And you're like, stock LS power.
But they were saying the upper limits of the LS is around, and I understand the absurdity of what I'm about to say, but it's like 2,000 to 2,200 horsepower, 2,000 to 2,200 horsepower. Like, you can run them higher and hotter than that. You know how they know? Cletus does it all the time, and there's a reason why his engines, after like 2 races, are going back to Texas Speed or whatever engine builder du jour, and what have you. It's just, I think this is again another great place to segue. That is the way Ford has just initially designed the engines is so incredibly impressive that there's not an aftermarket head company out there like a PRC for LS stuff. You know, they had to swap out a factory crankshaft at about 2,800 horsepower, which is something the engineer of said crankshaft was like, I didn't know that was going to be the upper limit, but here we are. You know, and there's so many. But again, in an LS, somebody else. And this segues into, as an overall piece of engineering, and I understand we're talking about an engine that was designed in the,
it was probably designed in the early 90s, but it was released to the public in 97.
Right. We're talking about an engine there as opposed to an engine that was in the 2011 or 12. Yeah. So, like, and there's a different philosophy.
Well, you'd like to think there's a couple of years of engineering in there, but yeah, because you guys, okay, so Corvette did this, and I feel like Mustang did this to you guys. It was like they did a refresh of the body style, but still have the 4.6
for 1 year,
and then they're like, also a Coyote now.
Yeah,
Corvette did that too. Corvette's done that, and it's like, God, those guys get so burned. They're like, new body style, so everyone buys it, and then they're like,
that was the 6.0 and the 6.2, right?
Also new engine. No, even in C4s, 1991, completely new interior, completely new body. And they were like, and so everyone was like, this is the new C4. And they're like, in 92, they're like, also LT1 is out now and it makes, actual horsepower. And they're like, effing A. I mean, it had to have burned so many people. And like even the C7, they do, I mean, everybody car manufacturing. C7, 1 year, the 2014, that's why you can find them. The 2014 automatic cars, worthless. It was the last of the non-ZF automatic cars. It was like still like a, torque converter 5-speed or something like that. And the very next year, from 2015 up, ZF8s. And so 2014 autos are just worthless.
Huh, that's interesting.
Hilarious. Anyway, car manufacturers burn people all the time. I just think it's funny where they have that 1 year where they're like, it's all new. And you're like, yeah. And then they're like, now it's all new. Actually, now it's fully all new. on the next year.
Mostly new doesn't ring as good as all new in the
brochure. As a consumer, if a guy bought an 05 Mustang, because that was obviously so sick at the time, and then they're like, oh, the refresh, I love that. I'll probably get one of those for the next 10 to 7 year or 5, whatever. And then they're like, cool. And then they're like, yeah, but you have the one that looks new but doesn't have the good motor. And you're like, oh.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
But like, like I said, there is an age gap between that and philosophy. However, and this is where, just to allow it to come in, GM did redesign the LS and did introduce a new
Several
V8,
times.
and I mean, and eventually got rid of it before the LT, which is actually a slightly different block, slightly
I know, but
stronger block than the LSs of the era. The heads flow really, really good CFM numbers until you start having to reach power levels where have to add port injection, at which point the heads do not flow, as they call it, droplets that well. But I think as an overall engineering exercise, from what they took, they had the mod motor, and they're like, okay, freely admit, these LS guys are kicking our doors in with this. What do we do? And Coyote's kind of an evolution of the mod. It's dual overhead cam, and they started playing with a lot of Coyote ideas in the GT500 engines. And
the early like 07s.
Because they still utilize the same basic idea for the chain drive on the cams. Where from the crank it turns one, and then there's a secondary sprocket, and that turns the other one, and things exist. And
see, that's the I didn't get into the nitty gritty in that. That's kind of the problem with the Coyote. There's a lot of stuff going on.
There's a lot of stuff going on, but they're not exactly.
I know. It's good stuff.
But the biggest thing is, again, from engineering, is that the Coyote, to me, for my money, is the American V8 equivalent of the Japanese economic boom in the late 80s and early 90s.
I mean, no, it's good. It's good.
So it's so insanely over-engineered for what it is. Between, again, there were guys talking about it to where there's guys who talk about it where the chat, since we're going to have Elliot will be right back. Chat, since we have a moment. Shifting lanes after dark. Here's a quick question for you. From factory designed, who's known to have the best flowing heads from factory? Hint, Steve, you should probably get this one correct. It's not American. It's not European. It is Japanese. But the company that is renowned for designing some of the best flowing and best performing heads or head in modern engines. And there you go, Steve. Honda. There have been multiple people who have sat here and said that the Coyote heads flow every bit as good as, if not better than, Honda heads. Again, this is all from factory. You can get a high-flowing head for an LS or an LT. You can get a strong bottom end. You can get, a cam for it. You can get all of this stuff that was designed and built by people who aren't Chevy. Whereas Ford from the box just decided, you know what, we're going to build an engine, set it to kill, and go. Like there's a reason there's no real big aftermarket head for the Coyote, because Ford nailed it. And as an engineering thing, when you start having a cross-plane V8 that can easily, the Gen 3 in my Mustang, it's right below me, in my garage, easily with some minor mods. No, actually, let me bring that back. With no mods, it can rev to 8,000. With springs, retainers, springs and retainers, it can get to 8,500 RPM. You need a lot of work to get an LS to rev 1,000 over what it came from factory. Or
you can do 1,000 over, but
if you put an 8 in front of however, if you put an 8 in front of the red line of an LS, it's not gonna be happy without some extensive internal modification.
Absolutely, and that's why I've loved the video. They're few and far between, but the super short stroke LSs that do rev up very high are cool. Um, but that's not what they're. It's also kind of their thing. That's kind of why they're applicable in truck motors and everything else. They're low down torque grunt machines. Um, I mean, traditionally, Chevy 350s are 5,600 RPM. That's about where you shift. That's just kind of how they are. But it's also due to the limit of we don't have an ass load of camshafts like you and all this other stuff. But a lot less complication due to that same
Right. Well,
fact.
also true. But it's again, there like every engine. So you brought up the trucks, and I think that's a good point because everybody sits here and thinks the Coyote fire breathing, screaming, performance based V8 and is different camshafts, technically a different ECU. Why I have no idea.
Why don't you just change the same ACU? Just
because I think Ford does ECUs slightly different, but because they've recently opened up the Gen 3 ECUs, and that's why you're seeing a flood of F-150s hit the racetrack.
I know, and it's because I was going to mention that in your favor. One of the coolest things is like a short bed, all-wheel or 4x4 with work truck Steelies, and like all these mods to it. The look stock, it's such a cool mod, and everybody's doing it. I mean, Cletus did one. There's numerous channels that have done them.
Cletus and now there's companies.
He gave away one. But there's numerous companies now that just sell a work truck looking short bed single cab 4x4 with a Coyote and like a Pro Charger, 700 plus horsepower. I mean, it's nuts. It's nuts package, and GM doesn't even make a single cab short bed anymore. You can't even get one. So I mean, more power to them. I love that. Like that's freaking awesome. And also, it says a lot to the drivetrain. Not to go down this rabbit hole too much, but like one of the most impressive things with Dodge when they came out with the Trackhawk is that like this all-time all-wheel drive system could handle the 700 horsepower and torque all the damn time because those systems are usually more fragile when it comes to those sorts of things. And yet it came with it's an automatic torque converter thing, but it came with a launch control. It came with all this. Like people are launching these heavy-ass Jeeps and Durangos that are all-time all-wheel drive with that much power and torque. It's insane. And given those were they meant for that to happen. Ford didn't mean for the short bed single cab work truck spec 4x4 to have to put up with this, but it can.
It was just the accidental.
And that's awesome. Like I said, not a Ford guy, but goddamn if I don't respect that.
And the truck engines, like literally, they have different cams, different intake manifold, and a different firing order, even though the crankshaft is the same.
I don't know why the firing order needed to be different. I mean, again, not an engineer on that, but that is odd.
I'm just gonna throw out a guess and say that with the with all things considered, that helped low down torque a little bit. And I will sit here and say this: that there's many people in the
Coyote that's true. Community. When cylinder 5 fires before cylinder 8, it really helps with torque. I'm sure there's science behind it. It's just,
why else do it? That's the only thing I can think of. Like it's just like it's because
there for sure there was a reason. I'm just being an armchair quarterback about being like, really. Like, it works in the Mustang, but they're like, in a truck, this will never work.
I mean, or it's just their rationale to sit here and stop people from putting fucking Mustang parts on the.
I guess it's just one of those funny things. I mean, I love it, but I mean, it's the same deal. It's like, I mean, but more extreme on the LS side. I mean, the displacement was entirely different. I mean, an LS1 is 5.7, but the LS, fill in the blank of whatever they used in Astrovans and. Sierras and then base model Tahoes and stuff is at 5.3. So it's like, that's a pretty big difference in.
That's giving away your torque advantage almost. But again, push rod engines versus dual overhead cam.
Yeah. And then and that was the whole advantage. I mean, I don't want to get into the weeds here, but that was like the whole thing with getting, and I come from a Yukon family, but that was the difference between getting a Yukon and a Yukon Denali. screw the luxuries and stuff like that. With the Yukon, you got the 5.3. With the Denali, you got the 6.0. You got the real LS, but still iron block. So that's the
Yeah.
real gem if people can find a Denali in the junkyard, because it's already, it's like right there. And then the other thing, and I will say is, I don't know why I'm shooting my argument in the foot here. While you guys have variable valve timing, what GM did in every application, starting with the C7 on the sports stuff, was cylinder deactivation, which you guys never messed with, if I'm correct.
No, the to my
And this
knowledge,
is not a
no.
power adder, but it is a complication adder. And in the, not fleet vehicles, I'm going to call them, but more pedestrian vehicles, your soccer mom Tahoes and stuff like that. That's the thing that messes up. It's the cylinder deactivation stuff is just kind of, it's a whole thing, and it messes up. I mean, even a guy at work, given he has a very high mileage Yukon, but he had to basically get a new motor because the cylinder deactivation stuff just absolutely shit the bed.
Yeah, cylinder deactivation across. I know multiple companies have tried it. It's a really
It's a good idea.
it's a
It's
good
just,
it's a good
yeah.
idea, but it's also what's the best way to it's you're making half the engine do all of the work, whereas I understand that not you know you don't have every cylinder firing on every like what have you, so it kind of
Right.
makes sense. It would almost make sense.
And I will say, so I've driven a bunch of them that have it, including Corvettes, and it shows you when it's doing it. There's a little display, like especially on Corvettes, all the time on C7s and stuff. It literally shows V8 in a little digital display, and when the load is light enough, it just goes V4, and then it goes, and then like you could like whisper at the throttle, and it'll go V8. But like you like the older first versions of it, you could, if you really paid attention and you have to be really bored on a road trip, you could feel it. And like I said, it's one of those, you gotta be a car whisperer and like really be in tune. You're like, I know it's gonna do it. And like, and you can feel it. You can't feel it shut down the first four, but you can feel when the other four kick back on. And it just makes this like boom. Like, I don't know. It's just like, for lack of better terms, like on my Prius, it's like you can tell when the motor kicks back on versus,
And plus, like,
whatever.
I guess it doesn't really matter, but like the complication of cylinder deactivation when it comes to like fuel lines, fuel pressure, like
Oh, it's insane. Which is
with
why, like I
injection
said, over
and stuff
time,
like
over
that.
after 230,000 miles, they just
Right.
kind of do it. And the popular mod is to, well, first of all, fix it and then don't let it happen. And then my buddy that had we had a Pro Charge C7, and that was one we Pro Charged it at 4,000 miles, so it was a very fresh car to receive a Pro Charger. And one of the tunes it just turned off cylinder deactivation. It just never stopped being V8. It was like part of the tune, like it used to.
Yeah.
And then, whatever. And then it's just, C7s are interesting anyway, because like I feel like everything after fourth is just another overdrive, and you have so many gears after fourth, which is which is wild.
I think I know it has at least two overdrives in that.
Well, it does. Like I said, fifth and sixth feel like overdrives, and then you have seventh.
But that's the thing. What I don't. So they put cylinder deactivation in a Corvette. Like, look, I understand why they do it. It's because they could sit here and say our overall fleet of vehicles
It's
makes
the
this
EPA.
MPG.
No, it's literally a crowd pleasing thing. It's also why they have skip shift.
Well,
I mean, and that started in my generation of Corvette. I have a thing that will physically block out in the correct parameters, even in '92, which would have been. I mean, this computer's gonna be screaming to figure this out. Compared to today, it will physically lock out 2 and 3 if the parameters are correct, and it just says 1 to 4, and you like have to shift to fourth. What surprised me though is I thought that was a Corvette exclusive. It's not. The Hellcat does that too if you have a 6-shift one. Fun
yeah.
fact. And then the American way to get around that is to press the throttle more.
Yeah.
And then it goes, oh, okay, you're right. You do need another gear. But like every time it does that, I'm like, I'm gonna bog the engine if I shift to fourth right now. But either way,
It's a weird thing. I mean, I think I think we're starting to get chat's
We
becoming
are getting in
active.
the weeds. I
But
do want to
I
talk
think
about.
like
Sorry, go ahead.
from an LS engineering perspective, what they've been able to do with what is effectively an engine from the 50s and 60s, I understand there's more,
I know it is. It is.
but I mean,
They came out with an engine in 1955, and they were like, "Let's just kind of keep making improvements on this design."
and
And
then they
it's
looked over at the Ford small block and was like, they're doing some really good things over there. Let's try to copy the everything. No, I'm kidding. But I think we talked to about the edge, like this again going off on a tangent. But
well,
we
no, I
talked
think
about the guy,
efficiency is part of the argument. I know it's not the fun argument, but like, so on paper,
right? But you can also
the
get
Coyote is more efficient.
it is significantly more. Well, that I think again you're talking about. Well, number one, we're now into the with my car, the Gen 3. We have port and DFI, so you can be incredibly precise with fueling,
That's nice. Yeah.
and we have compression on our side. Because I don't, I'm sure someone in chat will correct me, but no, I don't think there's any LS pushing 12-to-1 compression.
You say that, but now we can Google it. I don't know.
I'm
No, you're
pretty
probably
sure
right.
the
No.
and of all the LSs from factory, I think 11-to-1 and is
11-to-1 is like the biggest. Yeah, that's this. We're a big 10-to-1 compression gang over here.
so like more compression means more like bigger bang with less kind of thing. It's just it's again it's the concept of an engine that's basic principle was decades ago
I
versus an
know.
engine that is a product of this century, so to speak,
Well,
right?
what I say is we got it right back in '55, and we haven't. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
I
Which
mean,
is
we
why.
started adding cams in what the 60s and NASCAR told us to stop. So I mean,
Hey,
the
listen.
camera.
We had another company add cams in the '90s, and then we didn't do it again until like last year.
Right, but then you told the company came back with this engine that made a shit ton of power, and you're like, you know what? But the bore spacing's wrong. Make it again, and this time make it with less power.
No, what I want to say though, and I know this comes down to the car body shape and gearing. It's amazing though, because like the Coyote and everything that it's in, it's the more efficient engine. But at the end of the day, Corvettes get better gas mileage. It's just a fact.
I mean, when you have all those RPMs to play with, you want to play with them.
That's true. I'm just saying. I think it's because we're slipping through the air. We're so slick. I mean, even my Corvette will get 30 miles. Like it's insane. And then C5, C6. I mean, you can get, like I said, you get hybrid level 32 miles to the gallon, like between here and St. Louis.
Well,
in
it's
like
the
a
ability.
Z06. It's insane.
I think in that respect, it's the ability. So we've always talked about this on the show: is efficiency goes both ways. A highly efficient engine will need less fuel to do the same work, or, assuming fuel is the same, can make more power. Like there's two sides to efficiency, right? Efficiency,
Yeah, no, absolutely. But also, if you're able to be efficient, you can make power more efficiently, too.
right? And I mean, we make more power than you with less displacement.
I know. You have way more spinning stuff than we do.
Yes.
And less spinning stuff is more important. As far if we're gonna dumb this down to an elementary level, I have less spinnies. You have way more spinnies, and they're up here. And there's a bunch of this going on.
That's because our engineers can actually handle a little bit of complication.
Nope, our engineers are dead. They all died in 1955.
That's what I'm
And
saying.
then and then there's some guys be like, we really need to add fuel injection here. And they were like, yeah, we could probably plug that in, I guess. Yeah.
Wait, they want port fuel injection? What was it? Crossfire? Was the fuel injection
Crossfire.
on
That
the
was
Corvettes?
God, thank God that only lasted for 2 years. Nobody even remembers. It got all the fire in '84 for being like the only year that it did. But they had it in '82 as well, and like it makes I love that. You should watch the optimistic '80s promos for that. It makes total sense with the '80s graphics and stuff like that. You're like, fucking sick. They're this way, and the air comes in. Like
Yeah.
it makes total '80s sense. And then like you're like, oh well, we didn't have like the computer power or efficiency to make that actually work. Like it makes
Right.
total sense. Because same thing with the L98, which replaced it from there on out. The intake runners are like different sizes all around. It's a bizarre thing. It looks like it's this Half Life, thing that's on your face on the motor, but it's not. All the runners are different lengths, and it's like it's for a reason. And they were like, no, no, this is gonna be great.
Well, I think
It's
that was early days trying to manipulate airflow for torque. So
great, and
one that is another check for the old Coyote is that we have IMRCs, which is effect without getting too much into the weeds about it. It is the secondary throttle blades in the runners of the intake manifold that manipulate air speed.
wow, well, that's pretty complicated.
Well, I mean, Porsche Light uses it too. Just saying. Um, and if you believe Farley, Mustang will become the Porsche of Ford. Not sure it should, but
What a That's a nuts argument, but yeah, sure.
I mean, there's going to have to be a significantly smaller Mustang before we even
The,
think
the
about
Mustang
that.
is the Mustang of Ford. I don't.
Well, I think they don't mean it. They don't. So
I know.
it's an over exaggerate. They don't mean it from like a vehicle per vehicle type of a thing. They mean it from more of a corporate structuring and how to have a performance brand have different branches of a core
I
to
know.
it.
That's how much. That's why you love the Mach E so much.
It's not a Mustang. Mustang is pony car. Pony car, 2 doors, 2+2. Mach-E, crossover, 4 door, 5 doors.
Marketing exercise,
Yes.
name recognition.
Yes, it's like having an electric charger. But we have that sort of because the the ZR1 engine had 16 runners,
You're damn right it did.
and it was kind of a
That cool ass motor.
It's such a kick-ass motor that it shares just the bore spacing with an LS. It was
Yeah,
like,
you have Mercury Marine design something in Lotus.
oh, that was another
They're
thing.
gonna be like, well, I mean, we did pay for it.
Yes.
What, so listen, hey,
I mean, some
you
of the most
paid.
badass LSs come from the boat world.
So I'm saying you paid for the seeds. You get to look at the trees.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things. Is like maybe
That
it wasn't their idea, but they paid for it, and it's like, hey, that's ours now.
what
And
that tree take? 40, 35 years to grow? And at which point they were like, this tree is great. You know what we should have done? All right, take it apart, splice it with some of this Italian tree DNA. And
yes, and trust me, I own, like I said, my Maserati is the thing because people are always like, well, it's my whole plate on my Ferrari or my Ferrari, my Maserati is that it's not a Ferrari because on the forums, circle back to the beginning of this conversation, and this is making a point here, is I have the American V8 equivalent of an Italian car because it's the Ferrari. It's skipping my name because I don't dive into Ferrari or Italian V8 esoteric knowledge as much as I do with American stuff. It is, I know, the 360 and 430 motor with a crossplane crank. So it sounds more American than those cars, which is very much my style. So it still revs it still revs like 8 grand cross plane, which is nuts.
yeah.
And just like I said, it just sounds like this throaty, like crazy. It's a nuts sound. I love it, and I wouldn't change it for the world. And I've told you that car could have a million problems, and you start it up, and you're like, yep, I don't care anymore. And it all is forgiven. And it's like that. You're like, oh man, we've figured out a way to make this complicated ass V8 be kind of simpler in this way, and it sounds amazing. Which again, I meant to think of this when I took a break for a second. I do want to give you this, and I know it wasn't a contention point on the note here. I am frustrated, and I hate to admit that Coyotes sound so good with the minimalist of exhaust at all. Like you could just put like a basic catback on the thing, and thing sounds like it's a race car. I mean, they sound so damn cool so quickly. Even the 4.6s back in the day, you could hear a Mustang, you're like, God, it sounds really badass, and like it might even be moving that fast. It just sounded cool. Like it
Yeah.
takes a lot for an LS. It takes a good exhaust. You can't, fimble famble around with one. it takes a very curated exhaust setup to make an LS sound really, really good. But something about everything with the Coyote, and I know it has to do with the cams and the air and all this other stuff, but it sounds so good with so
Well,
little.
well, I will say this. Little is a good way of putting it because those they're just loud. They're
But it
you
sounds
can
cool.
go
It's a cool note. It's like you can hear it. Like
yeah,
I can even
especially
hear
when they're
it
singing
from the
up
road.
really high in their rev range. They sound like NASCARs. Like when you hear the drive by, that high pitched V8. Well, not high pitched compared to like what
A flat plate, not compared to a Coyote or
but
a
it's the
Voodoo.
higher pitch. It's not that thumping, you know, America. They scream. I mean, and that's. I can't believe I forgot about this because I had it in my notes and I just totally forgot about it.
I know. I know the sound isn't a quality, but I remember to think of it
But
to acknowledge you on that.
yeah, but it's really funny that you mentioned that because there are so many people who are sitting there and like Coyotes on cold starts. I will freely admit are can be too much, especially.
No, they're it's egregious. Is what I want to say. Like sometimes you're like, geez, dude, chill. Like I mean, I know you can't do anything about it, but it's
they've
like,
got
golly,
they've
dude,
got some
chill
bark,
out.
but like um they're insane and like I can't believe I didn't mention this when I was talking about the race cars. I left this out. They are touching briefly 10,000 RPM in race trim, which is I don't know. My brain just went there because of the sound and everything because they sound redonkulous. But like
It's pretty nuts.
it's one of those things where, and looks like we have the cylinder deactivation sparked some really good conversation. And
Yeah, I
chat.
really did. It was worth mentioning. I know it's not performance related, but it's
But
like it is a thing.
here's
And
the
that was the
thing.
thing, even on Camaros that had an LS, if you got a stick shift one, it did not cylinder deactivate in 2010. But if you had an automatic, it did.
I don't know why you like.
It's like
Who
so what a bizarre like thing that they did. But it was like another one of the things like you want to get the stick because it won't do that crap.
But here's one thing I think on this argument that we can both agree upon. Well, here's several
V8s
things.
sound cool.
American V8s are awesome.
Okay.
I love the diversification that we have in American V8s, right? If you look at European V8s, it's some sort of exotic flat plane thing.
They're all
Or,
some sort of fruity pasta screaming thing. I know. I don't like 'em.
or you have like, you know, your Mercedes, your Jaguar, all these other V8s, all almost, there's no, they're obviously different, but they're the same. In America, we do things different, old school, and I love that. And I love the fact that you have a cutting edge engine like the Coyote that could just be like, well, when we actually do put our minds to it, we make shit better than you at your own game. And if you don't believe us, I got this 2,000 horsepower one that's using tractor technology that'll drag your ass. Like, I do think that's inevitably very cool. And then lastly, I think especially in the more modern pony car / truck space, I think we can all agree that the 10R80 is the best automatic transmission because it was jointly developed by Chevy.
Yeah, so I can't talk shit. I mean, I've driven them. It's great. I mean,
But the transmission
is
has
it always shifting? Yes, but
You want to talk about gear
yes.
skipping,
it has so many speeds.
But I will say this is Jeff, the guy at Blue Sky, who built my Mustang and will be building the next one. He has
Tell them to build it, not to catch on fire.
well, that's really up to Everlast or Interstate at this point.
Maybe switch brands. Why don't we go to Optima?
I don't know. I'm thinking, well, yeah, but like for me, it's
Say,
like
like,
for me,
probably
it's like
don't-
for
probably
me, like
don't
every
repeat-
6 months, it's getting a new battery. Fuck it. Because I legitimately
Probably
already
don't go
taken
with
it apart
the
and
same
looked at the
brand
parts.
of battery. You're like, this
No,
battery
it's a
caught my
completely
last
different.
car on fire.
I think I don't even remember the last one. It was. I think it was Duralast. It was Duralast.
Duralast, yeah. No, it's
This
okay,
time,
whatever,
the one that's in it now is a. Oh fuck! I have to go and look. It's not a Duralast, but
you've got me concerned now because you know what? reminds me. So first of all, Tavares, listen, love him. Put the cheapest ass battery in my Maserati when I bought it from him, and it might be Everlast or whatever. I forgot because it's got a battery cut off, and I cut it off every time. But now with my both of my fuel pumps leaking and no padding in my trunk, I've just have like exposed fuel and a fuel cell, and then a cheap battery inches away from it. And I'm like, now with your thing, I'm like, damn, I really need to hope that's not a thing.
Yeah.
Like, listen, it's cut off. Like currently at the office, it's cut off. But every time I'm driving, I'm like, some fuel sloshes back onto that thing. That could be bad. And
Yeah.
Italian cars do like to immolate, so
Oh, they do that without the help of the battery.
yeah.
Just a couple of things, just to kind of get back on track.
Yeah, sorry.
That's the hilarious thing about the car fire is it was literally nothing I did.
No, but that's the
None
best.
of the
That's
build.
good.
None of the build. So like
You would have
because
felt
and I've said
horrible if it was something you did.
oh I don't know if horrible is the right word or it would have been almost easier. Not saying it should have, but the fact that the thing that failed was the thing I didn't mess with is kind of the thing. Is like when you mess
That's
with
fair.
something, you expect it to kind of I don't know, well whatever like
Oh yeah, you think that's gonna be the thing that's gonna mess up? Yeah.
you know um because all you have to do is like I mean just look at the quality of car that Blue Sky's bringing to Good Guys this weekend. They're in still their level. They have an old Mercury lead sled that they did a roadster shop chassis on. That is literally got a 10R80 and a Gen 3 Coyote in it.
I was gonna say, I was like, what motor is that? It'd be so. I would have loved if you would have said LS.
No, because it got rid of the flathead, and that chassis is actually still sitting in their shop because nobody wants to buy it, even with the flathead attached to it. But Jeff's truck with that 10R80, it's like he wants to digitally delete. He wants to digitally delete first gear because he's just destroying it on all-wheel drive launches.
God, don't even get me started on that. I mean, it's a pet peeve of mine with totally different deal with Porsche Panameras from the factory. I've driven 3 or 4 of them. You start because Porsches have this thing. You've driven them or at least seen videos. So it has the tack in the center, like everything else. It always has the gear indicator, like right here, and then it has a digital speedo below that, whatever else. But it always shows you the gear indicator, no matter what the car is. If it's Boxster, Panamera, GT3 RS, whatever. It always shows that. Only in the Panamera, you come into a complete stop, it just stays in 2. And I asked the salesman the first time that I drove one. I was like, so what's up with why won't it just go into first? He's like, it's for gentler starts. And I'm like, so what's first for? Like, it never went into first. It was just always started in 2. No matter, you couldn't do anything about it. Much like also on the other end of this, not like your 10-speed transmission, but my ex-wife's, which I'm claiming it as mine because I paid for it, but we have a Jeep Cherokee Overland 9-speed transmission. Odd.
Literally.
No matter what circumstance I've taken it on any road trip, it simply will not go into ninth. It won't. A large downhill sprint, like off throttle thing, you think, oh, this is perfect time for ninth. Nope. You have to I will knock the thing over and shift it into ninth. And I'll be like, okay, I'll put it back into drive, back to 8. Ninth is never an option for it. And I'm like, just make it an 8-speed then. This is so stupid. So I know this is such an esoteric rant about speeds, but it also, did you see, you saw it on my, by the way, anyways, join my Facebook group. It's fun. It's a bunch of car memes and crap. But I shared my friend's E46 M3 that's for sale on Bring a Trailer right now. And I got a lot of heat because it's an SMG car. And then I took full ownership. I don't know if you read the description, but I was like, I talked him into the SMG over a 6-speed. I know. You can visually react to that as much as you want. The car's immaculate and it's perfect, and it has the CSL tune on the SMG, which I'm telling you makes a big difference. Because believe it or not, those early SMGs didn't rev match downshift like F1 Ferraris and E gear Lamborghinis. Like if you downshiftted an SMG E46, it would like just kind of shift and then go like put the load on the clutch for like deceleration. It was kind of like harsh. But the CSL will blip the throttle and bang it down. Anyway, people were all pissed off at me for being like, "You recommended an SMG car to your friend?" I was like, "They're badass." And I also do believe in the future those are going to be the cars that are worth the money, because that was the first of all, nobody's going to know how to drive stick shift in 20 years, and second of all, those were the higher optioned cars, which are always the thing. It's like classic cars. There are certain things like big brake, big gas tank Corvettes that were like, who the fuck wanted this? Guess what? Guess what brings the big money now? It's like, it's that.
Real quick,
like I said, in these SMG, F1, and E gear cars, these guys are paying BMW a few thousand. Ferrari and Lamborghini, you guys are paying $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 for those transmissions. Anyway.
No, I mean, look, at the end of the day, and we're already seeing it. The highest performance vehicles are the ones with two pedals right now. You know,
it just is. Manuals are fun, but they just are faster.
You know, at the end of the day, and I've actually been thinking about this a lot lately with my car, is because, like, you know, I went down like Street Outlaws clip rabbit hole on YouTube, and say what you will about all of that. You know, this street racing on a closed concrete surface, but they've been driving on for forever. That's basically
with as big as that show is, that's completely sanctioned and totally legal now.
Well, I think even with the first season, they obviously could not do it in the illegal fashion because the cops.
Oh yeah, no, it's got too
like,
big. Yeah,
the cops would be like, they would just show up. So like, but no, like I've been watching it and I was like, man, it would be cool to kind of do like some drag and drive stuff and like have a car that's a little easier to drive fast on the strip.
But it doesn't matter because like it's,
you know. But then I was like, because like the biggest thing with my car right now that we're trying to figure out is, can we keep the shift sensor on, or can we transfer it over to the old? Because like, as you may remember, my old transmission is built. You know, it's billet gear set, bronze shift guides, carbon sync. Like, the only thing Ford about it is the Ford. It's a MT82 built by who built the manual boxes for the M3s and the Supras?
Getrag?
Yes, them. That's whose transmission.
Thank God I pulled that out.
I was drawing such a blank, but because my car right now does have rev matching, and I know that's like, you might as well.
I hate it, but it is so nice though.
Here's the bottom line:
you can recklessly let that clutch out, and you're not going to have any drivetrain shudder. It's so nice.
It's not even that. I used to short version.
No, it's a sloppy thing to get used to. I get it. It's so nice.
Well, just before I say the why I like it, just a little backstory is that, you know, I did some spec 944 stuff in the SCCA. We did a little bit on the quote unquote modified class for that or what have you. I used to be able to heel toe and all this other sort of stuff. And then I sprained my right ankle 3 times in 5 years. So my mobility in that ankle. I thought you were going to
say you got grumpy and old.
I mean, I did also I'm significantly grumpier than I used to be.
Okay.
And, but I physically, heel towing, just my flexibility in my ankle just isn't a thing. It's just not something I can physically do anymore. So I do like that from that perspective. It's between keeping that and like our clutch choice going forward, because the puck clutch is great, but it's an instantaneous power transfer.
Yeah, there's none of that slippage.
So I would like something.
Takes drivability out of it.
Well, drivability is fine in the sense of on public roads, I really only need 50 to 75% throttle with the old car to, be going much faster than the stock car. But when I'm at wide open throttle and I get through a shift, it would need for that clutch system to work. We're also looking into like a no lift shift kind of a thing, like an ignition cut. That's
Which
why
is badass though. If you ever
right.
Back to my LS argument. You know who you could do that with?
Coyotes
Corvettes from the factory.
It's a
competition mode.
Ford performance part for the Coyote.
Well, see, doesn't matter. Double touch of the traction control button from a Corvette in the C6. No lift shift. Boom. Same thing with Camaros.
That is nice to have.
Factory. No mods.
Now that's
roll off the dealership lot.
That is
blow
cool
a half shaft right immediately.
I mean, yeah, like, is it like traction control on a GTR? Whereas if you turn the traction control on the GTR off, it voids the warranty. If you turn this on,
no, it's launch control on the GTR voids the warranty.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. What I said?
Traction control.
I meant launch control. Duh.
Either way, no, it's only on the 09s and 10s. But either way, no, yeah, it's so stupid. And same thing with I didn't know this on some Porsches have a counter of how much you open the hood. Like my mom's Macan, it was like you opened the hood a bunch. It was like, what were you doing?
Showing off your engineering, assholes. What do you think I was doing?
You're like, there's a freaking cool airbox under there and a bunch of plastic. What do you think I was doing? Back to your argument of, race stuff and whatever. That's my primary argument, which again is not an LS Coyote thing, but it just is how I am, and I'll sing this from the mountaintops. That's why I believe if you're going to get a Lamborghini or Ferrari, get it in a convertible every time. If it's available, always get that. And people always go, well, because it's less stiff, and what about track times and stuff like that? It's like, I'm never going to take my Ferrari to the track,
right,
ever. But you know what I am going to do? Only drive it on nice days. And you know what I would like for that? A convertible. And you know what driving a coupe and convertible version of those cars is? The convertible is so much freaking better, and you can hear the sound, and you hear the wind whipping around. Everything's like, stop pretending that every day of your life is my track car, blah, blah, blah. No, it's your enjoyment car. This is your fun car. You don't need to make it think, and listen, I love track days. I will always go to them if I can. And I would love to have a cheap, even like a 944 track car. But it's not going to be my Ferrari, it's never going to be that.
Well, the price
and that's why I don't mind Corvette convertibles. And that's why I don't even really want a Z06 as much as I love them. I don't want a Z06 before the C7 because the C7 is the first Z06 you can take the top off on. If I'm going to spend that much money and have that much power, I want open air. It seriously makes all the difference in the world.
Well, that's going to have to be a second part to our Master Debater series.
It will. It will. I know. That's like
look,
I said.
I totally do. Look, I understand it. I have yet to see a convertible that looks as good as the coupe. Full stop.
No, not a convertible. Just the Targa.
Targa, both. Fine.
That's what I'm
Targa,
saying.
I totally get.
Off of the Targa. It's sick. It's the best of both worlds.
But again, it's never been. Again, I totally get the open air experience and on those types of cars.
They kind of made it like the retractable hardtop. It's like a Targa anyway. It's not. It's kind of hardly a convertible. Like the 430 is the last true convertible Ferrari, and after that, I'm like, just get the thing. Although I will say this, and I think I've said it on stream before. My dream Ferrari 2-car garage is a 430 Spider and a 599. What sucks is the 430 is the last convertible Ferrari with a clear engine cover. After that, you can no longer see the engine. But you can even try to find a 488 coupe. There's none. And then same thing with an F8. They're all Spiders. They even figured out, they're like, dude, nobody wants these in coupe. Because nobody's freaking racing them.
No, I totally get that. Basically,
they're all carbon fiber monocoques anyway, so it's like
the person who uses the argument of the stiffness of the chassis and the blip 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 and the that's just literally a trump card in the talk measuring contest that is sitting at the local bar comparing your cars. Well, it's a Ferrari, it has this, I don't care. Like, one of the things we're going to be, and real quick before I forget, because I have looked at it for the past 9 minutes, and every time I want to say it, Jesse, thank you so much for the stars. Jesse donated 1,000 stars.
1,000 stars. Wow, nice.
Appreciate that a ton, man. Thank you so much. Look, like, my whole thing is like, what I was trying to say is, like, I want to do a lot of these drag and drive events, and I want to make the car. I want to make that power on track. I don't want to say not more usable or what have you. It's a weird thing. It's like,
do you have a track near you? Just out of curiosity.
Like, as far as a quarter mile, yeah, it's about 10-15 minutes from me.
Oh, very close. Do you have a road course near you?
About 2 hours away.
Okay, that's about where my nearest one is.
And like, I thought about, like, I would love the whole premise of the first car was to do that stuff. Was to go to the drag strip, was to do a track day.
Street strip track.
That's why like we didn't part of me still really wants to do it, but that's part of the reason why we didn't go turbo. It's part of the reason why we didn't go positive displacement is that the drag strip centrifugal supercharger does boost ramp automatically, right? Just the nature in which it creates boost.
It's a belt driven turbo.
Yeah, exactly. But it's our, the more it spins, the more boost it makes. It's not like most positive displacement blowers reach peak and then
stay plateau.
And it just stays there. So from a quote unquote power under the curve,
I know
what have you. But no, that's part of the reason why we went centrifugal. Also, I wanted blow off noises, and turbos were complicated. And
that is true. Did you go with helical gears or straight cut gears? Because I know that's an option on, like, so when we pro charged my buddy's C7, I think he went with helical gears, so it wasn't just going, like, but it's just idling.
Oh no, it's there.
So it's like, it's pretty discreet, and the thing is quiet, and then unless he hits it and lets off, it's like, and the blow off is as long as you're letting off. It's not like a turbo; it goes, and it's over.
I'd have to look into that. I know it's noticeable but not intrusive.
Well, so helical are the ones that like make gear noise even at idle. Like, it sounds supercharged when you're just like cruising through a parking lot.
Let's see here.
But my buddy's Pro Charge C7 was, I believe, straight cut, and you would not know it was supercharged unless he was blowing off.
I'd have to look, but it's like you get more induction noise. I will say with this, you get more induction noise than supercharger noise at all. That's something I'd have to look. I don't know. I mean, I know it's a little noisy, but it's it makes. I mean, I'm on the medium pulley, and
it's a Pro Charger setup, right?
It's centrifugal. It's a Vortec V3.
It's a Vortec. Okay, that was the same brand.
Yeah. Well, to your Kleenex thing earlier, Pro Charger has become kind of the
Yeah,
the
I know.
of centrifugal.
But there's Vortex in Paxton. It's Pro Charger, Vortec, Paxton, and like I think because even the other companies
ESS.
that like but East Coast Supercharger ESC, they still use like a Paxton blower and just put their own thing on it.
Well, I'm talking ESS.
Oh,
the same guys who do the blower kits, like the kind of definitive supercharger kit for like the E9X BMWs and stuff. They do a Coyote one.
Steve just said, "I forever have love for the Vortec 4.3." This is a total tangent, but it's not even a car thing, but I love this, and I need to send it to you. Remind me. So my job, we manufacture computer boards, but one of the processes of the manufacturing is washing off the flux and stuff like that, and it requires like an industrial washer of sorts. And you'd think it was, it's just spraying water. The washer that's spraying water, it's this rotunda thing. It has a Paxton supercharger in it to pressurize the water. And I'm like, oh, that's a thing. And it's like, no, it's a belt-driven blower. And it's branded Paxton. I'm like, that's a legit just supercharger. I think Paxton and Pro Charger are
same company now. That's diving into the minutia, but that's like hysterical. Well, I mean, not for nothing. If you look at a lot of water pumps, they look like tiny centrifugal superchargers.
And they are, but like I said, I just love that it's a Paxton brand. It was like, oh,
that's hysterical.
That's that's
moving
badass.
some water.
I mean, like you look at this thing, it's like hissing, blowing water around. I'm like, it's because it's supercharged.
Yep.
It's just
when in doubt, add
water.
boost. No, it's like, oh man, like that's the thing. It's like, the good thing is the new car does have.
Well, no, okay, so break this down for me. I know you got two paths. I mean, are they radically different?
Yes.
Okay.
They're both. I mean,
I thought
to back it up for the premise.
original goal was that you were going to finish.
So my
the first goal with the first car.
That was my original goal because I didn't really think that. So one of the things my father did with his Corvette was he put in a 327 that he then had bored and stroked to 363 or somewhere between 360 and 370 cubic inches. I forget off the top of my head. So like doing that type of thing always has sat in the back of my head. Problem is when you build a motor, it's not exactly cheap.
Yeah.
But we've talking with Jeff and talking with some other people and stuff like that. Like the idea of, and this to the 9 viewers here, you're getting some exclusive breaking womp womp womp.
It's behind the scenes stuff. There's some inside baseball, folks. Get excited.
Yeah, very inside. So option A is to literally follow the same exact path we did with the first car. Take all the parts off of it. We're gonna go with a bigger. We would go with a bigger throttle body and a different intake manifold, so that should push horsepower up a little bit. And then, like I said, horsepower. It's not a big scale, but the difference between a Gen 2 and a Gen 3, that difference kind of follows suit. So we have a free 25 to 50 horsepower just from the different motor.
That's literally the free spot on the bingo card.
So, and again, I don't want to, I've learned my lesson. I don't want to put horsepower figures as goals. Even though
you will always be disappointed. Yeah,
you will always be disappointed. Even though I was really happy to get over 700, that was kind of my internal goal with the first car. We're hoping to make 50 to possibly more on that setup. The flip side is, and the idea popped into my head because the Mustang GT3 race car, right?
Yes, the GTD3 thing that. Or no, the
GT3,
you mean the actual race car.
The actual race car.
Okay.
That uses a, as of yet, never seen production displacement of Coyote. So I know that sounds like a weird thing to say. Let me back it up. When Ford first took the S550 Mustang racing in the variation of the GT350.
Well, no, it makes sense. Corvettes did this with the C5R with K-Tech and stuff like that. It was a different. It was an LS, but yeah.
Well, eventually, I hope it follows suit because eventually the 427 LS became a thing in the C6 Z06.
Right.
But
sort, yeah. But the point is it racing, which is great. That's the great roots you want.
So in the original GT350s, the GT4 cars, they ran a 5.2 cross-plane, what would later become the Illuminator crate engine that we talked about earlier.
Yep.
The new GT3 cars are running a 5.4 liter Coyote, and nothing on the street has had a 5.4 liter.
And I was and you could be the guy.
And they sell stuff, so there's people out there with stroker kits for the Coyote, but I have yet to see anything on the internet about it. And that gets me over the magical 600 crank horsepower number, which as long as I can make more than that, I'm happy. But I also don't want to do it on like 3 pounds of boost, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, if that makes any sense.
Is there a cat behind you?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that's Shades.
That's a good name.
That was my sister. She did great with that, and then Coco for the dog was not so good.
Hey, my sister gifted me my cat too. So,
well, our sister got this cat and then moved out without it. So
Oh, well, no, my sister got the cat and was like, I'm moving to Europe and it's crazy expensive to ship a cat. So do you want it? And I'm like, what? And I'm like, well, how much is it to ship a cat? She's like, it's like $3,000. I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, like, yeah, sure. And then I've had her for forever.
yeah.
So
No, we've
it's
always had
funny that
cats.
both of our cats started from sister origin.
Yes, and sister leaving.
Naming. I have no choice in my name.
Um,
But
so the idea of being able to do, and we were talking about sound earlier. Um, we think we know the firing order is the same, right? But that 5 point those GT3 race cars sound so fucking good. There's so
do you
much
think it's a
deeper.
firing order thing?
No, I think it's just a displacement thing, and I think it's just a race exhaust thing, right? You know, and they're like every other race engine, they're running probably 14 to somewhere between 14 and 16 to 1 compression.
Oh yeah, it's insane compression for sure.
You know, so but the idea of having a 5.4 or what I kind of landed on was a 5.35 Coyote that again is making six over 600 at the crank. That's
So
something
you're
that's
saying still? Are you saying with the supercharger or NA?
completely in it. So we would have to, but we're talking 5K for the stroker kit. Then
Yikes!
we're talking another just under 27 for the head work, but that's port a very 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 light port, mostly polish, springs, valves, retainers, head work. You know, so it starts to stack up, chasing that horsepower level, and that's why that like with each phase, right? Because Coyotes are interference engines, so it's not like I could just do the stroker kit and then get to the head
Right. Yeah.
and then go from there. So all in, it's about 12 to 16K for that motor to be a finished thing.
But it would be what a work of art.
It would be a one. It would almost be a one of one because, well, from internet phrasing, I could legitimately sit here and go the internet's first 5.3 liter Coyote.
I know you could
500.
even have a boomer board. You could put the whole thing up on. On there, be like, this is the only one.
You know, and
But it would be. But I would actually be interested in that one. I'd be like, oh,
that's what I'm trying to
shit.
say. It's like and I'm sitting so between all the parts that I would end up having. So from the back of my motor on the burnt car back, that's all going into the new car regardless. So clutch, flywheel, transmission, drive shaft, axles, stop the hop kit. That's all transferring over, and it's relatively simple, assuming you have a lift. From there, so that leaves me with good body panels, engine, supercharger kit, and so on, which is roughly in the neighborhood of about 12. So I'm looking at it from the standpoint of I can supercharge it and have about 6K to play with in doing other stuff, or I could, in theory, again, I know it still costs, say it costs 17 grand, right? 17 minus 12 is 5. 5 is my out of pocket. So it's not that big of a investment, right?
Sure. And what I would say for to play devil's advocate, not even devil's advocate, to encourage you on this is like you could supercharge it and have 6K left to play with. But the thing is, the car's already got suspension. It's already got like some other stuff. Like
Carbon
there's not
fiber.
a lot that you want to like.
I
don't feel like the 6K would go that long.
Right. Well, what it would do is what it would probably end up going towards is a quest for 800 at the tire.
Which would be sick. I mean, like I'm obviously a big proponent.
You know,
of
like
that.
I have a carbon fiber roof that has been sitting in my garage for 2 years that I want on my fucking car. But being that you probably have the same thing, right? Like if someone came over and said your Maserati, it's like, all right, let's put a carbon fiber roof on it. You'd be like, sweet. I kind of want to do the mirror and the side skirts.
Right.
And So like, there's all of that,
It's very like low on the totem
and we
pole.
start getting to the quote unquote finished product. There's
Right.
also carbon fiber vanity, not really adding much, even though these are steel roofs. But like the carbon fiber stuff, and then the big one is, and kind of the last thing I would really do is, well, the last thing.
Yeah, there's no last thing.
Right? Like, I have a whole list of stuff that I
Yeah,
want.
there's like, oh, this is the final thing I ever want to do.
So it's cams, probably not springs or retainers, just because I don't want to. Because again, like I said earlier, when we with the Coyote specifically, when we start getting above 75, 7,700 RPM, I think 7,800 RPM. Sorry, you start having to look into E85. Well, you know where the closest E85 to me? It's 75 miles away. You know how many? You know what miles per gallon the Mustang gets with E85? It's about 150.
It's crap. Yeah,
It's
no,
150 miles. So I got to drive 75 miles out.
yeah,
Get that
just,
for a half a tank at E85.
Exactly.
Like it's just that's not there. But cams, probably
I did like to take a slight sidetrack. So like my dad's like 2013 Denali has flex fuel, and like GM has that brilliant system even back then that can just sense the content in the fuel live. And so I remember I think it was Warped Perception. It was a YouTube channel that did the clear head on the gas or on the lawn motor, and you wouldn't believe like E85 cleared like this the carbon and all this stuff. I mean, literally, it was such a clean burn
well
that it's insane.
the
But the thing is, so yeah, it's obviously wildly inefficient. You make more power and stuff
well
like
it's
that. But that's the
you
thing.
need
Is
30
every once in a while.
as far as so if you have like this cup, right, and you fill it with gasoline to get the same to get the benefit of E85 is you then need to add 30% again.
Right.
So
Oh no, listen. Don't get me wrong in the science. Even we have a big ethanol company here, and I say company like they are. It's a racket. They know what they're doing. We couldn't make enough corn in this fucking country if we didn't have cities here to actually make corn powered
Right.
stuff work. But that's not the point. The point I'm making is it's damn near burning alcohol, and if cars can handle it, they make more power. And the thing is, what's cool about the GM stuff is you can put E85 in it, and even like a Yukon will be like, all right, I got E85 now.
yeah.
And next
Well,
thing you know, it's crazy. Like it's
Yeah.
not like so you literally are. I don't know if it's a tangible amount, but you're gaining horsepower
Well, let me
filling
put
up
it
these
this
things,
way:
and
you
you
can make
literally are clearing it out. It's
Yeah.
impressive.
with the Gen 3, the setup I have in my car. Long tubes, intake, full exhaust, good tune, E85, 500 wheel.
Ideal, honestly. That's so
Which is
much fun.
fantastic if I could go over there and
And
get
not
E85.
and not have a quarter of a tank by the time you got back to enjoy.
Yeah, because one of the things is we could have went to 750 on the old setup, but we needed more octane. Either more octane or E85.
We don't have it here. We don't even have we don't have 93 here. We have 90.
Okay, well, you have my condolences.
Yeah,
93 is
we don't
pretty
even
prevalent.
we don't even have 93. And then our places that sell E85 are few and far between now. They sell like this crap. And then now there's a gas station down the road, actually over by Hoovie, that they market it. They go, we have 93, and it's not. It's ethanol induced gas.
Oh, so
to
like an
bump the
E30 or E40?
But the point is, they don't advertise it like that. So the thing is, if your car's not tuned for it, you're not getting 93. You're actually probably hurting yourself by putting this crap in there. And the reason we don't have 93, I did look into it. Yeah, the reason I did look into it, it's not like a legal thing. It's because of our like, just our altitude. They were like, we just simply don't like cars run at this point and be like, for some EPA reason, they can't sell us 93 because 90 is the same here. as 93 would be with 2,000 feet of elevation or whatever bull crap that is.
Oh.
But I'm like, trust me, it just hurt like having a Hellcat or like Corvette where it goes, please God, put 93 in this. Every time you open up the fuel the fuel door, and you're like, I can't.
I guess
can't.
Boustain sells pretty well out there.
Yeah, you're like, I will put the highest octane I can, and you'll have to deal with it.
Yeah. So I mean, I think this is kind of a. We'll put a bow on the conversation, and then it's a good place to wrap.
Yeah, for sure. It is.
It's almost
late,
tomorrow.
Yeah.
The thing
this
is
is
like
good.
the biggest
the
thing.
LS is obviously the superior motor, and
If you don't like horsepower,
it would be very fun if more people swapped Coyotes into things, and I'm not against that.
I think the biggest difference is that the LS is just a more affordable route, even though it takes more to equal the Coyote in terms of performance.
You can throw a rusty eBay turbocharger on an LS, and it'll handle it just fine.
Yeah, but again, thanks to everyone who watched, everyone who liked, everyone who shared, to everyone who donated. Jesse, thank you again. But as for this one, guys, that's it. Thank you for sticking with us as well through all the technical issues. I had totally forgotten about it because Elliott's company is that good. It just makes me forget about the bad things.
Yeah.
But
I'm a wordsmith. I don't know what to tell you.
Thank you guys again, and